The characters and events in this book are fictional. Any similarity to actual persons, living or dead, or to actual events is coincidental. Printed in the United States of America. For permissions or inquiries, contact Arcadian Jones LLC. Arcadian-Jones@gmail.com. CTRE. Pet. Author. Bio. Seal Helton is definitely not an alchemist. He is not special. He would insist on this point, even when it is clearly untrue. He has been mistaken for many things, occasionally a government official, once a federal agent, an error. That amused him, as no such agency would survive his habit of answering questions with better ones. He is more likely to spend a weekend in quiet conversation at a remote retreat than circulating at a formal gathering, and he dresses, accordingly, intentionally plain, carefully unremarkable, and slightly out of step with whatever fashion claims authority that year. Helton is a philosopher only in practice, never by announcement. He avoids titles, resists labels, and distrusts anyone too eager to accept them. His thinking is precise, his humor dry, and his interests eclectic in ways that make sense only after prolonged exposure. He has a habit of noticing patterns others overlook, then declining to explain why they matter. Those who know him well describe him as disarmingly sincere, oddly disciplined, and difficult to categorize. He does not try to stand out. He simply does. This book appears here without pretense, and so does its author. Cest. 7. Table of Contents. Each numbered chapter is followed by an untitled interstitial. These sections are not supplemental, they are parallel. Book 1. Part 1. Deniability. Chapter 1. Custodial Authority. Chapter 2. Treaty without sunset. Chapter 3. Instrumentation drift. Chapter 4. The Rainbow Clause. Chapter 5. Sampling rights. Chapter 6. Children who dream together. Part 2. Continuity. Chapter 7. The Atlantean File. Chapter 8. Escalation Ladders. Chapter 9. Non-intervention is a policy. Chapter 10. The Appendix Strategy. Chapter 11. Biological Inventories. Chapter 12. Contracts older than memory. OSEM. Part 3. Collapse of Denial. Chapter 13. Spectral Irregularities. Chapter 14. Isotopes that do not belong. Chapter 15. Standing to enforce. Chapter 16. The Cost Ledger. Chapter 17. Blue Star. Daylight. Chapter 18. They're here. 9. Deset. Jednact. Forward. This book does not behave like a novel. It does not orient the reader, introduce itself gently, or clarify its intent. It does not pause to explain terminology, justify tone, or signal where reassurance might be found. These absences are not oversights. They are structural. Some narratives are constructed to be persuasive. Others are constructed to be coherent. A smaller class is constructed to remain intact under pressure. This text belongs to the latter category. The form you are about to encounter mirrors how certain systems record events internally as conditions. Shift, constraints tighten, and records are updated without regard for whether the result is comforting. The scope of the material extends beyond modern political arrangements and beyond the period, usually treated as historical. Several of the frameworks referenced assume time depths, custodial relationships, and non-human participation that precede civilization as it is commonly defined. These elements are presented without emphasis, justification, or mythology, consistent with how such matters appear in administrative and continuity records. The voice of this book is therefore not intimate. It does not confide. It does not seek trust. It does not negotiate meaning with the reader. It records conditions, constraints, and transitions as they appear within a closed framework. Where gaps exist, they remain. Where authority is implied, it is not named. Where consequences are visible, they are not interpreted. Readers accustomed to fiction that reassures, clarifies, or redeems may find this disorienting. That response is expected. Disorientation is often the result of encountering a structure that does not adapt itself to the observer. No claim is made here regarding prediction, prophecy, or disclosure. The text does not argue that events will occur as described, nor does it ask to be believed. It presents a continuity of internal logic and allows the reader to decide whether that logic holds. This work assumes the reader can tolerate unresolved information without instruction. It assumes the reader understands that some records are not written for public consumption, even when they are made visible. It assumes that meaning, if it emerges, does so through accumulation rather than revelation. Devact. If the book feels procedural, that is because procedures outlast explanations. If it feels indifferent, that is because indifference is often how systems appear when viewed without narrative mediation. If it feels incomplete, that is because completeness is rarely available from within a constrained perspective. No guidance is offered on how this text should be read. Speed is neither rewarded nor penalized. Agreement is not required. Identification is not expected. The only assumption is that the reader will encounter the material as it is presented, without demand for accommodation. Nothing in the pages that follow will ask for your consent. But as you read, remember that it remains possible to pray, and you should. Trinact, CTRnact, Patnact. Chapter 1. Custodial Authority. The briefing room had no windows, no insignia, and no sign-in log visible to the people who entered it. That did not mean the room lacked identity. It meant the identity was not meant to travel. Rooms like this were not agency property in the ordinary sense. They persisted across reorganizations, across administrations, across changes in the names on letterhead. The furniture changed. The protocols did not. 7 individuals took their seats without exchanging introductions. Introductions were for groups that expected turnover. Everyone in the room already knew which professional histories were relevant and which were forbidden topics. 2 of the 7 held rank high enough to dominate any ordinary meeting. Neither attempted it. A single folder lay centered on the table. No classification header. No caveats. No cover sheets specifying distribution rules. A document did not need markings when it did not circulate. The projection hesitated for a fraction of a second before resolving. No one commented on it. The delay fell within tolerance, and anything within tolerance was, by definition, irrelevant. The continuity liaison, male, mid-50s, voice trained to avoid emphasis, waited until the door latched. A small indicator above the frame shifted from green to blank. No one looked at it for longer than a fraction of a second. "We are inside the window," he said. No one asked which window. The term had been in circulation for decades inside this compartment, and centuries in older forms that no one would reference aloud. The liaison tapped the table once, and a projection rose from the surface. It displayed a date range, then a sequence of timestamps, each paired with a terse label, observational thresholds, decision gates, enforcement checks. It read like an operational calendar written by someone who thought months were indulgent. The astrophysics lead, civilian, attached through an institutional pipeline rather than a badge, tilted her head slightly. "We have been inside windows before." "Yes," the liaison said. "Not this close to the visibility condition." Cessnact. The legal analyst spoke without looking up. "Before anything else, I'm going to restate the scope of authority under which this meeting exists." No one objected. There were rituals in the system, and they served a purpose. Rituals reduced ambiguity. Ambiguity created exposure. "Custodial authority is not sovereignty," she said. "It does not confer ownership. It confers obligation, maintenance, compliance. Transfer when required." A pause. "Not for drama, for precision. The political entity through which custodianship is expressed may change," she continued. "The custodial obligation does not. This room exists because that obligation has been continuous." The military officer, joint staff liaison, eyes trained to stop moving, leaned forward. "Let's be concrete. We're here because the continuity considers the instrument at risk." "We're here," the legal analyst said, "because the continuity considers the obligation at risk." The difference mattered. The instrument was replaceable. The obligation was not. The projection changed. A short excerpt appeared. 4 lines, translated and cross-referenced. There were ellipses indicating missing material and a footnote marker to a reconstruction appendix that was not in the folder on the table. Custodial succession clause reconstructed. Custodianship persists independent of political form, contingent upon continuous fulfillment of planetary maintenance obligations. Failure of maintenance triggers reassignment. Recognition of succession shall be affirmed by guarantors. The legal analyst read it once, then let the words hang. "The United States holds custodial authority," she said, "not by conquest, discovery, or virtue. It holds it because the prior custodians failed, and guarantors affirmed succession." The logistics officer, quiet, older than the others, a person who lived in tables and transport capacity, asked, affirmed, or compelled. The analyst allowed herself a thin nod. Both terms appear in different records. The operational meaning is the same. The continuity liaison touched the table again. A second excerpt replaced the first. This one was modern, formatted like a legal memo, with a signature block removed. The heading read simply, "Standing. Standing determination, internal advisory, beneficiary species retain. Participatory rights proportional to infrastructural contribution. Enforcement standing is held by guarantor entities and recognized custodians. Beneficiaries may petition. Custodians may execute. Guarantors may compel." The astrophysics lead glanced from the excerpt back to the liaison. "This is your reminder that humans have standing because we run the machine. Because we keep it running," the liaison corrected. "Yes." The scientist did not smile. "So our rights are conditional." "All rights are conditional," the analyst said, as if reciting a maxim. A third excerpt appeared. This one was older again, with a different translator's hand visible in the margin notes, and a set of bracketed clarifications that looked like an argument frozen in ink. "Hydrological prohibition, flood covenant, no signatory shall initiate or permit a planetary extinction event via hydrological means resulting in total biospheric loss." This prohibition has no sunset. The military officer spoke carefully, like someone handling unstable material. The water clause remains binding. It remains binding, the legal analyst confirmed. And narrow. The astrophysics lead asked the question that always followed. And everything else? The analyst did not hesitate. Unaddressed, silence. In ordinary rooms, unaddressed invited debate. In this one, it invited accounting. The continuity liaison turned the projection back to the operational calendar. A red band occupied a section of the timeline near the present. The label read, Unaided Visibility Threshold. Awesome act. When we cross this, he said, custodial authority shifts from preparation to execution. The Joint Staff Officer watched the red band as if it were a weather front. Execution of what, specifically? The liaison did not answer immediately. He looked to the logistics officer instead, because the question was not rhetorical. It was an ordering problem. The logistics officer opened the folder that had been sitting untouched. Inside were not slides and not speeches. Inside were lists, geographic identifiers, capacity estimates, procurement schedules. Names appeared only as alphanumeric IDs. Alongside each was a column for viability, another for transport, another for retention. The astrophysics lead saw the tables and did not ask permission to read them. Appendix activation, she said, almost to herself. The liaison nodded once. The appendix strategy transitions from planning to movement when deniability fails. The scientist, the one who had spoken first about windows, scanned a line item and stopped. These are not shelters, she said. These are continuity nodes. Correct, the liaison said. The military officer looked up. We're going to be accused of building sanctuaries for the elite. We are building continuity, the liaison said. The accusation is a public narrative problem, not an operational one. Public narrative becomes operational when it turns into interference, the Joint Staff Officer replied. The liaison acknowledged that with another small nod, which is why this room exists. To reduce interference risk, the legal analyst returned to first principles. Custodial authority imposes obligations. It also imposes constraints. We cannot act outside standing. We cannot act outside enforcement thresholds. We cannot force unity. We can only build capacity and execute when triggers are met. The logistics officer ran a finger down one column, then stopped at a numeric threshold. We are short, Devatanact. We are always short, the liaison said. The scientist asked, if the public sees it, if unaided visibility happens, what prevents immediate escalation by the opposing side? The liaison did not answer directly. Non-engagement protocols remain in effect until the next ladder rung, he said. Sampling rights do not equate to overt action. Overt action triggers enforcement attention. Enforcement by whom? The astrophysics lead asked, already knowing the answer would be unsatisfying. The liaison held her gaze. Guarantors, auditors, entities that do not intervene until thresholds are crossed. The military officer's voice flattened. So we are relying on systems that do not care whether we live, only whether rules are followed. We are relying on systems that preserve structure, the legal analyst said. Living is what we try to extract from that. The room went quiet again, and in the quiet, a truth emerged that no one spoke. They were not at the top. They were near it. They were entrusted with execution, not authorship. The Joint Staff Officer broke the silence. If we decline to execute, a procedural question, not defiance. It was the question that separated obligation from choice. The legal analyst answered, then succession will be forced. We will be recorded as having failed maintenance obligations. Custodianship will be reassigned. The word recorded mattered. In this framework, record was reality. Reputation was not social, it was juridical. The astrophysics lead closed the folder gently, as if the paper could bruise. When does the public see it? She asked. The liaison pointed to a segment of the calendar that had no date, only a range with probabilistic shading. Sooner than institutions are ready to admit, he said. Later than we would prefer, the scientist asked. And the council? The liaison's expression did not change, but his tone shifted by a fraction. The council is aligned. Full understanding exists there. It will not be made explicit. It will be referenced, and it will govern. The logistics officer looked down at the tables again, then spoke as if reading aloud from a ledger. If the public can see it in daylight, supply chains fracture. Transportation becomes contested. Local authorities act independently. Panic is not our main risk. Fragmentation is... The military officer nodded once. Civil friction. Opportunistic violence. Distrust of federal authority. Correct, the liaison said. And none of that alters the astronomical commitment. The astrophysics lead's jaw tightened. You're telling me the sky is the deadline. I'm telling you visibility is the trigger, the liaison replied. The sky is the mechanism. The meeting ended without a vote because there was nothing to vote on. Voting implied discretion. Discretion implied alternatives. The system did not acknowledge alternatives at this stage, only branches with different loss curves. As chairs pushed back and the folder was collected, the liaison issued the only direct order of the session. Activation memorandum goes out under the usual channels, he said. No signatures, no distribution list. All execution nodes move to readiness posture Alpha. The Joint Staff Officer hesitated at the doorway. Alpha is going to be noticed. Not by the public, the liaison said. By the people, we need to notice it. Outside the room, the machinery of the ordinary state continued uninterrupted. Flights departed. Markets moved. People argued over transient things. The public did not consent to custodianship because consent was not part of the structure. Custodianship did not require awareness. It required compliance, maintenance, and readiness when the sky stopped cooperating with denial. 21. Chapter 1. B. The fire had already burned down to coals when her great-grandmother spoke. Not because the story needed darkness, but because the work did. The coals gave just enough light to see hands moving, thread passing through hide, the small, precise motions that did not require looking once the body remembered them. The girl sat cross-legged on the floor, close enough to feel the heat, far enough to keep from being corrected. She was working slowly, too slowly. Her great-grandmother did not comment. You don't pull it tight all at once, the old woman said after a while. You let it settle first. The girl adjusted her grip. The stitch improved. Outside, the men were gone. Drums had started before sunset and moved farther away as the night deepened. The sound did not disappear. It spread out, became part of the air, something you noticed only when it stopped. Why do they dance tonight? The girl asked. Her great-grandmother did not answer immediately. She worked another stitch, then another. They are not dancing for anything, she said. They are keeping time. The girl considered this. With what comes back, the old woman said. She did not look up. The girl watched the needle move. Did it come back before? Yes. Before my grandmother's grandmother, the old woman said. And before hers, how many times? The old woman paused. This time she did look up, not at the girl's face, but at her hands. Enough that we learned not to count it that way. The fire shifted. A coal collapsed inward. The girl frowned. Did it hurt people? Yes. Did people die? Yes. The girl accepted this without drama. She had learned early which answers invited more questions and which ones closed doors gently. Why didn't they stop it? They did, the old woman said. They stopped what they could. The girl's thread tangled. She tugged too hard. The stitch puckered. Her great-grandmother reached over and loosened it without comment. Slow, she said. If you rush it, you weaken it. The girl nodded. Were there rules? She asked. Yes. Who made them? The old woman smiled, just slightly. No one who asked permission. Did they break them? Yes. Every time. Did they get in trouble? The old woman threaded her needle again. That is not how it works. The girl waited. When you plant too much in one place, the old woman said, the soil stops giving back. It doesn't punish you. It just doesn't hold anymore. The girl looked down at the hide. So the rules are like that? Yes. Do they tell you when you break them? No. How do you know? You notice what stops working, the old woman said. The drums outside changed rhythm. Not louder, closer together. The girl asked, did the people know before? Some did. What did they do? Some tried to make it bigger, the old woman said. Some tried to hide. Some tried to pretend it was not happening. And some, the girl said, guessing now. Some kept small things alive, the old woman said. Hands, stories, ways of moving through a season without taking too much. The girl finished her row. It was uneven but holding. Is that why we do this? Yes. Will it come back again? The old woman did not answer right away. She tied off her thread and set the work aside. Only then did she speak. It is already back, she said. That part always happens first. 24. The girl felt the weight of the words without understanding them. Did not ask what it was. Outside, the drums slowed. Will they see us? The girl asked. The old woman considered this carefully. If we are still here, she said. Then yes. The girl nodded. That answer made sense. Her great-grandmother handed her the finished piece. You keep this, she said. Not because it's finished, because it can be. The girl held it with both hands. The fire went on burning. 25. Chapter 2. Treaty without sunset. The document existed in at least 6 materially different forms, and none of them disagreed on the point that mattered. The legal analyst kept the oldest version open on her screen, not because it was authoritative, but because it was stubborn. Stone impressions rendered into vector approximations. Gaps where erosion had taken its due. Marginal reconstructions layered like sediment, each generation of translator convinced it was correcting the last. She trusted the modern copy more, and relied on the ancient one anyway. Treaties that survived catastrophes did so because they were written to be read by adversaries. There was no poetry in them, no invocation of shared values, only constraints, permissions, and silence where silence could later be exploited. The clause in question occupied less than 4 lines. No signatory shall initiate or permit a planetary extinction event via hydrological means resulting in total biospheric loss. Everything else that followed in the document was commentary, exception handling, or record keeping. She highlighted the phrase hydrological means and let the system pull every instance of its use across the archive. There were fewer than she expected. The term appeared only where ambiguity would later be fatal. The analyst leaned back and folded her hands, not out of habit, but because the posture slowed her down. She had learned early that speed created overconfidence in language work. Language punished certainty. Across the table, the continuity liaison watched her without interrupting. He had sat through this exercise before. Each cycle required the same ritual, the same reaffirmation that the text still said what it said, and did not say what people wished it would. It has no sunset, the analyst said finally. No expiration, the liaison agreed. No supersession clause, she continued. No conditional dependency on compliance by beneficiaries. No provision for reinterpretation based on population size, technological maturity, or moral development. The astrophysics-led frowned. So it binds forever. It binds as written, the analyst corrected. Forever is not a legal term, the military officer interjected, and it applies only to water. Yes, the analyst said, only to planetary extinction via hydrological means. Flooding, inundation, sustained hydrospheric collapse. Not drought, not ice, not secondary water effects. The scientist seated near the end of the table spoke quietly. Fire, the analyst, did not look up. Fire is not mentioned. Silence again. The room had learned to respect that sound. The liaison gestured, and a second document appeared. This one, an internal advisory memo, drafted decades earlier and updated periodically without changing its core conclusion. Interpretive advisory absence of prohibition does not imply endorsement. However, enforcement mechanisms are triggered only by explicit breach of enumerated constraints. The astrophysics lead read it twice, so something catastrophic could still be lawful. Lawful is not the same as permissible, the analyst said. It is simply not prohibited. The analyst added a marginal note, not for emphasis, but for accounting. Exploitation margin increasing. It was not a warning. It was a trend line. The Joint Staff Officer crossed his arms. That distinction won't matter to anyone outside this room. No, the analyst agreed. It never does. She scrolled further down the ancient text, past sections that dealt with custodial succession and guarantor standing. Her finger stopped on a passage that had been 27. Reconstructed from 3 partial sources, and a comparative analysis of parallel traditions. Destruction shall be construed as irreversible loss without successor custodianship. She enlarged it. This, she said, is where most arguments fail. The liaison leaned forward slightly. Say it plainly. If life persists, the analyst said, even in reduced form, even in fragments, even without continuity of civilization, the event does not meet the treaty definition of destruction. The logistics officer exhaled through his nose. Reset. The analyst nodded. Reset, reassignment, reclamation. The language varies. The logic does not. The astrophysics lead looked up sharply. So the covenant prevents annihilation, not suffering. It prevents a specific kind of annihilation, the analyst replied. Suffering is not enumerated. The scientist shook her head slowly. That's monstrous. It's adversarial, the analyst said. There's a difference. The liaison finally spoke again. And, standing, the analyst switched documents. The modern advisory returned, this time with a highlighted section. Beneficiary species retain participatory rights proportional to infrastructural contribution. This is where humanity exists in the framework, she said. We are not original signatories. We are not guarantors. We are beneficiaries with standing derived from maintenance. The Joint Staff Officer frowned. So if we stop maintaining, 28, we lose standing, the analyst finished. Which is why failure is not an option that exists on paper. The astrophysics lead tapped the table once. And Enlil, the analyst allowed herself a brief pause before answering. The name did not appear in the treaty texts as a personality. It appeared as a role, a signatory mark associated with administrative authority that had since lapsed. Enlil is bound by the same text, she said. But he interprets ownership differently. Property, the military officer said. Property, the analyst confirmed. The treaty does not define Earth as a shared commons. It defines it as a maintained system with assigned custodians. The scientist leaned forward. And humans are what, in that view? The analyst met her eyes. Workers, no one disputed it. The room did not run on euphemism. The liaison checked the time. So our position is unchanged. Yes, the analyst said. The treaty remains binding. Narrow. Exploitable. And our exposure? Unchanged, she replied. We are compliant. We are preparing. We are within standing. The logistics officer closed his notebook. And when the public asks why none of this stops what's coming, the analyst answered without hesitation. We do not argue theology. We do not argue morality. We argue text. The astrophysics lead looked unconvinced. That won't satisfy anyone. It does not need to, the liaison said. It only needs to hold. The analyst minimized the documents and locked the terminal. Treaties like this don't exist to be fair, she said. They exist to be enforceable. 29. The meeting broke shortly after, without ceremony. Outside, nothing in the building reflected the weight of the discussion. Fluorescent lights hummed. People moved between offices carrying ordinary concerns. The covenant had survived the flood of Noah. In the biblical record, the Rainbow Covenant functioned as a narrowly scoped prohibition, a formal assurance, against total planetary destruction by water, rather than a guarantee against all forms of catastrophe. It would survive interpretation. 3030. 31. Chapter 2. B. The work had a pattern, and patterns mattered. Her great-grandmother did not explain that. She simply corrected her hands when they drifted, not sharply. Just enough that the mistake did not become habit. You're pulling too hard again, she said. The girl loosened the thread. The hide relaxed under her fingers. It feels like it won't hold, the girl said. It will, her great-grandmother replied. If you don't try to make it obey. They worked for a while without speaking. The fire had settled lower than before. The room smelled faintly of smoke and old wood, a smell that did not cling to clothing so much as memory. Outside, the drums had stopped. That meant the men had gone farther away into the part of the night that did not echo back. The girl broke the silence. Why do some things have rules, and some don't? Her great-grandmother did not look up. Everything has rules. No, the girl said. Some things don't. The rain doesn't. The animals don't. The old woman smiled, but only with one side of her mouth. They do, she said. They just don't argue with them. The girl considered this. Who makes the rules? She asked. No one, her great-grandmother said. That's how you know they're real. The girl frowned. Then, how do you know what they are? You learn where they stop you, the old woman said. And where they don't. The girl watched the needle pass through the hide. Like the edge. 32. Yes. What happens if you go past it? The old woman paused, then set her work down. Not as a warning, as a mark. You lose things, she said. Always. Yes. The girl nodded. That answer was complete. After a moment, she asked, Do the rules ever change? The old woman picked her work back up. No, she said. But the places they touch us do. That was harder to picture. When did they touch us before? The girl asked. Her great-grandmother took a long time to answer. Before the Great Water, she said finally. The girl's hands stilled. The one in the stories. Yes. Was it because people were bad? The old woman shook her head. People were loud, she said. And heavy. The girl waited. They took more than the land could give back, the old woman continued. And they forgot where to stop. Did no one tell them? Many did. Why didn't they listen? The old woman did not answer that. Instead, she reached for a different piece of hide, one that had already been worked thin in places. Feel this, she said. The girl ran her fingers over it. Some areas were smooth and strong. Others were worn almost through. If I pull here, the old woman said, tugging gently at a thin spot, what happens? It tears. And if I pull there, holds. Did the hide change? The old woman asked. No. Did the rule change? No. Only where the force landed, she said. The girl looked at the fire. So the water came where it could. Yes. Did it take everyone? No. Why not? The old woman threaded her needle again. Because not everyone was standing in the same place. The girl absorbed this quietly. Did they know it was coming? She asked. Some did. What did they do? 34. They moved less, the old woman said. They took smaller steps. They made fewer marks. The girl frowned. That doesn't sound like much. It was enough. The girl hesitated, then asked, Did the ones who came after remember? Her great-grandmother's hands slowed. Some remembered what happened, she said. Some remembered where not to stand, and some remembered nothing, but lived in ways that kept them safe anyway. The girl pulled her stitch too tight again. The old woman corrected it gently. Careful, she said. If you close it too much, it won't flex. The girl adjusted. Why don't we write it down? She asked. So no one forgets. The old woman laughed softly, not unkindly. Because writing stays where you leave it, she said. And people don't. The girl nodded. After a while, she asked, Are there rules we're not allowed to talk about? Yes. Why? Because talking about them makes people think they can change them. The girl considered this. Can they? No, but they try anyway. Yes. The fire popped quietly. The girl finished her row and held it up. It wasn't perfect. It would work. Her great-grandmother looked at it and nodded once. Good, she said. Will the rules touch us again? The girl asked. The old woman did not answer right away. She listened instead, as if to something the girl could not hear. They already have, she said finally. The girl felt a small tightening in her chest. Is that bad? It depends on where you're standing, the old woman said. The girl looked down at her hands. Where are we standing? Her great-grandmother met her eyes for the first time that night. Not at the edge, she said, but close enough to know it's there. The girl nodded. That was enough. They returned to their work. The rules did not need to be spoken again. They were already holding. 36. 37. Chapter 3. Instrumentation drift. The anomaly did not announce itself. It entered the system as a rounding discrepancy, the kind that survived only because no one had been looking for it. Optical arrays registered a marginal brightness increase where none was predicted. Radar returned a solution that disagreed by less than 1%. Infrared showed nothing unusual at all. Each instrument evaluated independently, past calibration. The discrepancy was logged, flagged at a low priority, and absorbed into routine variants. Dr. Eliza Moreno noticed it because she had written the cross-check protocol herself 15 years earlier, back when the system was still experimental, and oversight committees pretended to read source code. The protocol existed to fail loudly when observational domains diverged beyond what physics could plausibly tolerate. It had not failed loudly. It had failed politely. The system logged the divergence under a deprecated classification schema that had not been in active use for 12 years. Moreno noticed. She did not correct it. Moreno reran the sequence using updated ephemerides, then again with deliberately degraded assumptions. The divergence persisted. It remained too small to justify escalation, too consistent to dismiss. The data behaved as though it were being corrected in real time, nudged back into compliance whenever it strayed too far from expectation. She did not think in terms of impossibility. She thought in terms of inputs. Either the sky was wrong or the instruments were lying in agreement. Both conclusions were unacceptable, but only one would end her career. She escalated the issue one level, not to command, not to review, but to correlation. The response came back in under 4 minutes, which told her more than the content itself. Observed. Known variance. Maintain current model. No action required. No signature. No attribution. Moreno stared at the message longer than was professionally advisable. Known variance implied precedent. It implied prior review. It implied that the anomaly had already been categorized, named, and placed somewhere she did not have access to. She returned to the live feed. The object, if it was an object, occupied a region of space that should have been empty. Its apparent trajectory obeyed gravitational prediction until it did. Not, then resumed compliance as if the deviation had never occurred. The correction was subtle but consistent, non-Keplerian motion, briefly expressed, then masked. She annotated the data with neutral language. Drift, noise, instrument disagreement. She avoided the word anomaly. Anomalies attracted attention. Attention produced meetings. Meetings produced conclusions that closed files. Moreno forwarded a sanitized data packet to a colleague at a separate facility under the pretext of a calibration comparison. The reply arrived less than an hour later. We're seeing it too. That made 3 systems. By late afternoon, the divergence appeared in a 4th domain. Spectral analysis showed shallow discontinuities in emissions that should have been smooth. Energy appeared to be absorbed and re-emitted fractionally out of phase. When averaged, the effect vanished. When localized, it returned. The data resisted integration. Moreno drafted a memo and stopped before sending it. She knew the pattern. The memo would be read by someone who already knew the conclusion and did not require her contribution. Her role was not discovery. It was confirmation. She revised the language again. No speculation. No synthesis. Just measurements. When the call came, it did not reference the memo. You're seeing drift, the voice said. Yes. 39. You're not the first. Then why am I still seeing it? A pause. Not hesitation. Calculation. Because it is not time to stop. Moreno frowned. That is not a scientific answer. No, the voice agreed. It is an institutional one. Should I continue logging? Yes. Should I publish? No. The line disconnected without ceremony. Moreno saved the session locally, then duplicated it to an external archive that technically did not exist. It was a habit she had never been instructed to form and never been instructed to stop. As the hours passed, the object's apparent magnitude increased by a fraction of a percent, still invisible to the naked eye, still beneath thresholds that would force public acknowledgement, still present across systems that could not agree on how to describe it. The following morning, a restricted advisory circulated through select scientific channels. Cross-domain inconsistencies associated with deep space observations are to be treated as instrumentation artifacts pending further guidance. Independent publication is discouraged until variance convergence is achieved. Discouraged was a word that carried weight. Moreno closed the advisory and reopened the raw data. The divergence had grown again, then receded, as if something were actively managing its visibility. She could not prove intent. She could only document behavior. 40. At midday, a secondary alert triggered. Gravitational sensors registered a localized fluctuation too small to matter and too coherent to ignore. The fluctuation dissipated within seconds. The system flagged it as environmental noise. Moreno marked it anyway. That evening, she stood outside the facility and looked up. The sky was clear, blue, ordinary. No star shone where one should not. Inside the system, something was adjusting itself just enough to remain unremarkable. That unsettled her more than any overt signal would have. Overt signals demanded response. This demanded patience. And patience, she was beginning to suspect, was not a human advantage. The divergence remained logged under provisional classification, pending correlation, that had not yet been authorized. 41. Chapter 3. B. The night was quieter than the last one. Not empty, just thinner. The fire had burned down further, and her great-grandmother added a small piece of wood, no more than necessary. It caught slowly, as if deciding whether the effort was worth it. The girl watched the flame change color before returning to her work. Why do some things hide? She asked. Her great-grandmother did not answer right away. She counted stitches instead, not aloud, but with the slight movement of her lips that meant she was keeping track. Because being seen is not always safe, she said finally. The girl frowned. But if you hide too much, no one knows you're there. That's the point, the old woman said. The girl thought about this. But then how do you know when to stop hiding? Her great-grandmother smiled faintly. You feel the pressure. Like the weather. Yes. The girl threaded her needle again. Sometimes the clouds look normal, even when a storm is coming. The old woman nodded. Because storms don't need permission. The girl asked, did it hide before? Yes. For a long time. How long? Longer than people like, the old woman said. 42. The girl hesitated. Was it watching us? The old woman's hands slowed, but did not stop. Not the way you're thinking, she said. How then? Like someone standing just far enough away to see if a fire spreads. The girl stared into the coals. That sounds unkind. It's not kind or unkind, her great-grandmother said. It's careful. The girl considered this. Did we know it was there? Some did. What about everyone else? They saw what they expected to see, the old woman said. The girl pulled the thread through and asked, what did it look like? Her great-grandmother tilted her head slightly. That depends on how you looked. That's not an answer. It is, she said. Just not a simple one. The girl sighed, then asked, did it ever make mistakes? Yes. What kind? Small ones, the old woman said. The kind that only show up when you compare many days together. The girl brightened. Like, when the stitch starts to lean. Yes, her great-grandmother said. Exactly like that. The girl looked down at her work. A line of stitches curved just enough to notice if you were looking for it. 43. If you don't fix it, the girl said, it keeps drifting. And if you fix it too hard, the old woman said, it tears. They worked quietly for a while. Outside, something moved across the sky. Not fast, not slow. Just enough that the darkness seemed to shift. The girl noticed without knowing why. Sometimes, she said, it feels like things are being adjusted. Her great-grandmother glanced toward the doorway, then back to the work. They are, things, she said, that don't belong to one place. The girl asked, do they see us? Yes, all the time. No, the old woman said, only when we make it easy. The girl frowned. How do we make it easy? By lining ourselves up, her great-grandmother said. By being predictable. That sounds bad. It's safe, she said. Until it isn't. The girl pulled another stitch. So what do? We stay a little uneven, the old woman said. We don't shine too bright. The girl smiled, like the stars that blink. Yes, her great-grandmother said. Not the ones that stay fixed. The girl paused. What happens when you can't hide anymore? 44. The old woman set her work down and leaned back slightly. Then you stop pretending, she said. That sounds scary. It can be, she said, or it can be a relief. The girl asked softly, did that happen before? What happened? People argued about what they were seeing, her great-grandmother said. They blamed their eyes, their tools, each other, and the thing that was hiding. It waited, she said. The fire shifted. A spark rose and vanished. Why didn't it leave? The girl asked. Because it was not finished measuring, the old woman said. The girl did not understand the word, but she understood the weight. Did it change what it saw? She asked. Yes, her great-grandmother said. Slowly, the girl nodded, like watching someone grow. Yes, she said. And deciding whether they can carry something heavy, the girl's hands stilled. What if they can't? The old woman looked at her carefully. Then the weight doesn't disappear, she said. It just gets moved. The girl swallowed. Do we know what it decided last time? Her great-grandmother returned to her stitching. We know what stayed, she said. And what did not? The girl finished her row and rubbed her fingers together. I don't like being watched. No one does, the old woman said. That's why most people pretend they aren't. The girl looked toward the door again. The night looked the same as it always had. Is it still hiding? She asked. Her great-grandmother did not answer immediately. It's not hiding, she said finally. It's adjusting. The girl nodded, even though she did not fully understand. They worked until the fire was almost gone. Nothing dramatic happened, which was how she knew something had changed. 46. 47. Chapter 4. The Rainbow Clause. The clause appeared in the record long before anyone called it that. In the earliest reconstruction, it was simply a line, carved shallowly enough that erosion had nearly erased it. Later copies treated it with more care. Marginal notes accumulated, cross-references multiplied. By the time it reached modern legal form, it had acquired a nickname, used only, inside restricted compartments and never in writing that might circulate. The Rainbow Clause was not poetic. The name was a convenience, a mnemonic for something narrow and absolute. The legal analyst preferred the oldest copy when she reviewed it, even though it required more work to read. Modern renderings were too clean. They carried the risk of interpretation disguised as clarity. She brought the fragment up on the display, alongside its canonical modern translation. No signatory shall initiate or permit a planetary extinction event via hydrological means resulting in total biospheric loss. She read it once, without annotation. Then again, this time marking what was not there. No reference to punishment, no definition of intent, no exception for necessity, no accommodation for progress. The clause did one thing and refused to do anything else. Across the table, the continuity liaison watched her process without interruption. He had learned that legal review required space. Pressure produced shortcuts. Shortcuts produced exposure. This is the clause the public recognizes, the astrophysics lead said. At least in outline. The flood, the promise, the rainbow. Yes, the analyst replied. But the public version is narrative. This is contractual. She adjusted the display to show a parallel column, excerpts from the biblical text, stripped of devotional framing and reorganized for semantic comparison. The language was looser, but the constraint was identical. I will never again destroy all flesh by the waters of a flood. The correspondence is precise, the analyst said. Not identical in phrasing, but aligned in scope. Water only. Total destruction only. The scientist seated near the end of the table frowned. So the biblical covenant is a partial disclosure. It is a preservation of record, the analyst corrected. Filtered through culture, but legally consistent. The military officer leaned back, and that record was allowed to persist. Yes, the analyst said, because it did not threaten enforcement. It clarified a boundary. She pulled up a secondary document, an internal assessment prepared decades earlier by a joint legal historical team. It categorized surviving mythological records by compliance risk. Flood narratives were marked as low risk. Fire narratives were marked as ambiguous. Star narratives were flagged for restricted handling. The Rainbow Covenant functions as a limit, the analyst continued. It constrains method, not outcome. The logistics officer spoke quietly, meaning the planet can still be cleared. Reset, the analyst said. Reassigned, reduced. As long as water is not the instrument of total loss, the astrophysics lead tapped the table once. And enforcement, the analyst nodded and switched displays again. Enforcement authority rested with guarantor entities, not beneficiaries. The text was explicit on that point. Humans could invoke the covenant, but they could not enforce it unilaterally. 49. Our standing is participatory, the analyst said. We can object. We can document. We can petition. We cannot compel. The Joint Staff Officer exhaled. So the promise everyone remembers is not ours to enforce. No, the analyst replied. It never was. The liaison finally spoke. But it is enforceable. Yes, the analyst said. And that matters. She brought up a case file, heavily redacted, drawn from a prior cycle. The details were sparse, but the outcome was recorded clearly. A hydrological event had been halted mid-escalation. Not reversed. Halted. The text accompanying the record was brief. Method prohibited. Threshold exceeded. Enforcement triggered. No explanation followed. None was required. The covenant is narrow, the analyst said, but it is absolute within that boundary. When crossed, enforcement is immediate. The astrophysics lead studied the file. So Enlil knows this. Yes, the analyst said. He authored the boundary. The scientist's voice sharpened. Then why would he test it again? Because the boundary is not the objective, the analyst replied. The objective is the planet. Silence followed. Not shock, but alignment. The liaison checked the time marker projected at the edge of the display. We are approaching the point where this clause becomes operationally relevant again. The military officer nodded. Visibility. Yes, the liaison said. Once visibility thresholds are crossed, interpretation pressure increases. Public discourse activates symbols it barely understands. The astrophysics lead grimaced. Rainbows, promises, protection, 50. And disappointment, the analyst added. When the sky does something else. She closed the ancient fragment and returned to the modern text. The danger is not breach. The danger is misinterpretation. The logistics officer looked up. Explain. If the public believes the covenant prevents catastrophe entirely, the analyst said, they will delay action, resist preparation, and assume safety where none is promised. And when catastrophe comes by another mechanism, the military officer said, they will claim betrayal. Yes, the analyst said. And betrayal narratives fracture compliance. The liaison folded his hands, which is why we do not invoke the clause publicly. Correct, the analyst said. We treat it clinically, as a constraint on adversaries, not a reassurance for ourselves. The astrophysics lead sighed. It would be comforting if it were broader. Comfort is not a legal category, the analyst replied. She gathered the documents and minimized the display. The rainbow clause does not save us, she said. It limits one class of extinction. Nothing more. The scientist asked the question that always surfaced at this point. And if fire never comes? The analyst met her gaze. Then the clause will have done exactly what it was written to do. Nothing. The meeting ended shortly after. Outside the room, weather reports scrolled across monitors in adjacent offices. Rain was forecast in 3 regions. Flood warnings were issued and resolved, as they always were. Water still fell from the sky. The covenant held. It always had. Whether anything else would was a separate question, and not one the clause addressed. Chapter 4. B. The fire was low enough now that shadows reached farther than the light. Her great-grandmother adjusted the coals with a stick, not to make them burn brighter, but to keep them from going out. The movement was practiced. Nothing wasted. Nothing rushed. The girl watched the glow spread again. Why do people remember some promises and forget others, she asked. Her great-grandmother did not answer immediately. She pressed the edge of the hide flat with her palm, feeling for places that would not give. Because some promises are comforting, she said, and some are not. The girl frowned. A promise is a promise. Yes, the old woman said. But people hear what they want inside it. The girl threaded her needle. Like when someone says they will never do one thing, and everyone thinks that means they will never do anything bad. Her great-grandmother nodded once. Exactly like that. The girl hesitated. Is that how it was before? Yes. With the water? Yes. The girl's hands slowed. So the promise wasn't that nothing bad would happen. No, the old woman said. It was only about how it would not happen. The girl pulled the thread through and asked, why would someone make a promise like that? Her great-grandmother considered this carefully, because even those with power place limits on themselves, she said. Sometimes to prove they can, sometimes because they must. The girl looked into the fire. Did it help? It helped people survive long enough to misunderstand it, the old woman said. The girl thought about that. Is that dangerous? She asked. Yes, her great-grandmother said. Very. They worked quietly for a time. Outside, the night felt heavier than before, not louder, not colder, just more present. The girl asked, "What happens when people believe a promise protects them from everything?" The old woman's hands paused. She did not stop working, but the rhythm changed. "They stop watching the other edges," she said. The girl nodded. "And that's where it breaks." "It does not break," her great-grandmother said. "It holds exactly where it was placed." The girl frowned. "Then what breaks?" "People," the old woman said, "or the ground beneath them." The girl swallowed. "Did that happen before too?" "Yes. More than once." The girl was quiet. After a moment she asked, "Why didn't anyone tell them?" "They were told," the old woman said, "but the telling was quiet and the comfort was loud." The girl pressed a stitch flat with her thumb. "So they chose the loud thing." "Yes." The fire shifted. A coal cracked softly. The girl looked up. "Is that happening again?" Her great-grandmother did not answer right away. She adjusted the hide, then checked the stitching with her fingers, not her eyes. "It is closer to happening," she said, "because this time, people believe the promise is on their side." The girl felt a tightening in her chest. "Is it not?" "The promise does not take sides," the old woman said. "It sets a boundary, like a line on the ground. And if you stand on the wrong side," the old woman met her eyes, "then the line does not move for you." The girl nodded slowly. "Can the promise stop what's coming?" she asked. Her great-grandmother returned to her work. "It can stop one way," she said, "and only one." The girl whispered, "Is that enough?" "It has never been enough," the old woman said. "It has only been precise." They worked until the fire dimmed again. Nothing dramatic happened. The girl felt that as clearly as she felt the warmth fading. "That's worse," she said quietly. 54. Her great-grandmother nodded. "Yes," she said. "It usually is." They finished the piece and folded it carefully, not to hide it, but to keep it from catching. Outside, the night remained calm, and for the first time, the girl understood that calm did not mean safety. It meant restraint, and restraint could be lifted when it was no longer required. 55. Chapter 5. Sampling Rights. The authorization did not look like permission. It arrived as a routing notice, embedded inside a logistics update that most recipients would never read past the first paragraph. No signature, no explicit directive, just a change in status code, attached to a set of coordinates and a narrow time window. Sampling status elevated. Treaty compliant, non-engagement protocols remain in force. Inside the continuity, that was enough. The continuity science custodian reviewed the notice twice, not because it was ambiguous, but because it was final. Sampling rights were not requests. They were acknowledgments that a threshold had been crossed quietly enough to avoid public consequence. She opened the annex that accompanied the routing notice. It was clinical, sparse, and deliberately incomplete. Biological substrates, environmental matrices, isotopic distributions, developmental markers. Each category was paired with a quota and a margin of error. No justification was provided. None was required. Sampling had been occurring for millennia. What changed was scale and proximity. The nearer the system moved toward visibility, the narrower the tolerances became. Precision replaced curiosity. She flagged the annex for review by legal and logistics, not because approval was needed, but because coordination was mandatory. Sampling created obligations downstream: storage, transport, accounting, custody. Every sample became a liability the moment it was collected. The legal analyst responded first, within treaty allowances. No breach, documentation sufficient. That was all. The logistics officer replied next, attaching a capacity table that did not include commentary. Transport viable within window. Storage allocated. Loss acceptable. Acceptable was doing a great deal of work in that sentence. The custodian closed the annex and opened a separate file that never traveled with the official documentation. This one listed human considerations, not ethics. Constraints. Public exposure risk low. Attribution deniable. Psychological fallout contained. Contained meant delayed. Delay was often the best outcome available. Sampling teams operated under protocols that had been refined to remove choice. Operators did not decide what to take. They executed lists. Lists did not feel. Lists did not hesitate. The first category was environmental: soil cores, water samples, atmospheric particulates, minerals extracted from regions with long, uninterrupted deposition histories. The interest was not in abundance, but in ratios. Isotopes told stories that records could not. The second category was biological. Flora, fauna. Microbial communities adapted to specific stressors. Samples were taken across climates, latitudes, and altitudes. Diversity was prioritized over utility. The third category required more care. Human sampling did not occur openly. It never had. Treaty language permitted biological substrates where sovereignty was not asserted or had been contractually waived. That waiver took many forms: orphan status, institutional custody, legal limbo. In some cases, consent was recorded. In most, it was assumed by proxy. Children were listed separately. Developmental plasticity made them valuable. Genetic diversity made them irreplaceable. The annex specified quotas by region, not by nation. Demographics were expressed statistically, stripped of identity. The custodian paused on the summary line. Primary objective: viable replication. Secondary objective: cataloging and identification. Replication meant cloning. Regeneration. Medical continuity. No euphemism softened that reality. 57. Cataloging meant long-term tracking across cycles. A separate statistical addendum accompanied the human cohort. It stated the distribution without interpretation. More than 70% of sampled humans were of German origin by ancestry. The remaining portion, approximately 30%, was drawn as a composite mix from the rest of the world, selected to fill genetic and regional gaps rather than to reflect population size. She forwarded the file to the continuity liaison with a single annotation: proceeding with intolerance. His response arrived quickly. Proceed. No qualifiers. No reassurance. Sampling operations did not resemble raids. There were no armed teams, no visible craft, no disruption that could be traced cleanly. The events registered as anomalies, missing time reports, dreams, sensations that resisted coherence. Children reported being taken. Adults dismissed it. The dreams followed a pattern that only became visible in aggregate. Amputation without injury. Removal without damage. Bodies returned intact. No scars. No blood. Parents noticed fear. Physicians found nothing. Within the continuity, the diagnostic data streamed in continuously. Neurological responses, stress tolerance, recovery curves, genetic markers associated with adaptability. The custodian noted the distribution again and moved on. Sampling did not explain itself. One of the non-human observers filed a compliance report midway through the window. Sampling within scope. No engagement. No mass casualty events. That report carried more weight than any human certification. As sampling progressed, secondary markets activated quietly. Biological materials that fell outside continuity needs entered broader circulation under existing trade exceptions. Organs, tissues, endocrine substrates. Commodities cataloged by function, not origin. The custodian did not authorize those transfers. She recorded them. The galaxy was not governed by a single ethic. Trade occurred where treaties permitted it. Enforcement existed only where guarantors cared to intervene. Free humans were respected. Sovereignty was acknowledged. The boundary between free and unfree shifted constantly. Inside the continuity, discomfort was logged but not acted upon. Moral injury was a known cost. It was not an input variable. A briefing note circulated late in the window. Public awareness, risk increasing. Social media amplification detected. Fringe narratives converging. The custodian forwarded the note to the liaison without comment. His reply was short. Expected. Continue. The final sampling report closed with a line that appeared in every cycle. Objectives met. Variance acceptable. Continuity assets secured. Outside the system, children woke up frightened. Parents reassured them. Physicians found nothing wrong. News cycles moved on. Inside the system, inventories updated. Storage vaults sealed. Long-term preservation protocols initiated. Sampling rights expired at the end of the window. They would not be renewed openly. They never were. The custodian closed the file and logged the final entry. Sampling complete. Liability ongoing. 59. She shut down the terminal and sat for a moment in the quiet that followed. The silence was not relief. It was a counting space. Somewhere above the planet, something adjusted its trajectory again, just enough to remain within tolerance. No one asked whether the samples would be used to save humanity or replace it. The treaty did not require that distinction. It required compliance. Everything else was downstream. 60. Sessentuno. Chapter 5. B. The work that night was quieter, not because they spoke less, but because the room itself seemed to listen. Her great-grandmother chose a smaller piece of hide than usual. It was already marked in faint ways, places where the surface had been tested and left alone. The girl noticed. "Why that one?" she asked. "Because it has already given," the old woman said, "and knows how much it can lose The girl ran her fingers across it. It feels thinner. Yes. Is that bad? It depends, her great-grandmother said, on whether you ask before you take more. The girl frowned. You can ask a hide. You can listen to it, the old woman replied. That is the same thing. They worked for a while without speaking. The fire was steady, not bright. The kind of fire that stays where it is placed. The girl asked, did they ask before? Her great-grandmother did not need clarification. Sometimes, she said, and sometimes they decided the answer for themselves. The girl stitched carefully. What happens when you take without asking? You do not feel it at first, the old woman said. That is why people do it. The girl nodded. Like when you cut your finger and don't notice until later. Yes, her great-grandmother said, except the cut is not always on you. The girl paused. On who then? 62. The old woman guided the needle through a difficult spot. On the one who cannot pull away. The girl swallowed. Did it hurt? Yes. How much? Enough to be remembered, the old woman said. Not enough to stop it. The girl absorbed this quietly. Why didn't they stop? She asked. They told themselves it was small, her great-grandmother said. Necessary. Temporary. The girl looked down at the hide. Was it? No, but they kept doing it. Yes. The girl tightened a stitch, then loosened it again. How did they know how much to take? They measured, the old woman said. With what? Tools, she replied. Numbers. Comparisons. The girl frowned. Did they measure the pain? The old woman shook her head. They measured what remained useful. The girl felt a tightening in her chest. That sounds wrong. It is incomplete, her great-grandmother said. Which is worse. They worked in silence. 63. Outside, something moved. Not close, not far. Just enough to be noticed if you were paying attention. The girl asked softly, did anyone say no? Yes. What happened to them? They were told they did not understand the need, the old woman said. That they were standing in the way. The girl pressed her lips together. Were they? No. What were they standing in between? Her great-grandmother said. What could be taken? And what should not have been? The girl looked up. Is that dangerous? The old woman met her eyes. Very. The girl returned to her work. After a while, she asked, does taking always leave a mark? Yes, her great-grandmother said. Even if you cannot see it, does it heal? Sometimes, she replied. If you stop, and if you don't. The old woman did not answer immediately. She turned the hide over and checked the back, where the stitches showed more clearly. Then the mark becomes a doorway, she said, and other things pass through. The girl felt a chill that had nothing to do with the fire. Is that happening now? She asked. 64. Her great-grandmother's hands slowed. It has happened before, she said. And it has started again. The girl whispered, can we stop it? The old woman threaded her needle carefully. We can choose where we stand, she said. And what we refuse to take. That doesn't stop them. No, her great-grandmother said. But it keeps us from becoming part of the work. The girl nodded. They finished the piece together. It was smaller than the others. Stronger where it mattered. Thin where it had already given enough. Her great-grandmother folded it and set it aside, not with the finished things, but with the ones that were waiting. The girl noticed that too. What happens to it? She asked. It rests, the old woman said. Until it is asked again. The girl looked at the fire. Will we be asked? She said. Her great-grandmother did not answer right away. Yes, she said finally. Some of us already have been. The girl felt the weight of that settle into her hands. They sat quietly after that. Nothing was taken, which was how the girl knew something had been measured. 65. Chapter 6. Children who dream together. The first reports arrived through channels that were designed to discard them. Pediatric sleep disturbances, night terrors, transient dissociative episodes, shared thematic content across unrelated households. None of it exceeded reporting thresholds. All of it fit into categories that had existed long before anyone in the continuity had reason to care. What changed was volume. The continuity science custodian did not see the pattern at first. She saw individual files, intake summaries from hospitals, school counselor notes, insurance-coded visits that ended without diagnosis. The system treated each entry as noise, because that was what it had been trained to do. The correlation engine flagged the anomaly late. Clusters of reports appeared across multiple continents within the same narrow temporal windows. The children described similar experiences using language appropriate to their age and culture, but structurally identical in sequence. Removal, separation, loss, return. The custodian requested a consolidated brief. The analyst assigned to the task stripped the narratives of imagery and emotion. He reduced them to event markers and neurological responses. What remained was unsettling in its regularity. The dreams involved entities the children described as magical, fairies, leprechaun-like figures, helpers. The cultural language varied, but the physical description converged with unusual precision. Large dark eyes, smooth pale faces, reduced facial features, proportions that did not match human anatomy. In every case, continuity analysts classified the entities as the Greys, operating as collection assets under non-human supervision. The children did not name them that way. The system did. In every case, the child reported the removal of a body part, a hand, an arm, a leg. In a small number of cases, the head. In every case, the child woke intact. No scars, no physiological trauma, no measurable tissue damage. The custodian read the summary twice, then opened the raw data. Parents reported panic. Physicians reported nothing. Imaging returned normal. Blood work showed transient anomalies that resolved within hours. Cortisol spikes, neurotransmitter fluctuations, elevated markers associated with rapid memory consolidation. The dreams were vivid. They were not symbolic. The analyst's note was precise. Shared experiential architecture suggests external induction rather than spontaneous psychological contagion. Actor profile consistent with gray-mediated sampling operations. The custodian forwarded the brief to the legal analyst and the continuity liaison simultaneously. The liaison responded first. Expected signal leakage. Continue monitoring. The legal analyst responded next. No treaty violation identified. Non-engagement remains intact. The custodian did not reply. She opened the time correlation overlay. The dream clusters aligned tightly with sampling windows. The overlap was not perfect, but it was sufficient to rule out coincidence. She added a private annotation. Secondary effects consistent with gray proximity operations. Another analyst had already appended a footnote. Cultural priming possible. Symbol imprinting may persist into adulthood. 67. The custodian scrolled further. A demographic breakdown appeared at the end of the report, appended without emphasis. More than 70% of affected children were drawn from the same ancestral cohort identified in the sampling addendum. The remaining cases reflected global distribution consistent with the secondary selection pool. The custodian closed the file and reopened it, not because the data had changed, but because she needed to see it again. The dreams were not communication. They were not warnings. They were not messages meant for interpretation. They were byproducts of gray operations conducted within allowable proximity thresholds. The non-human observers had not been required to prevent them. The protocols addressed mass casualty risk and overt interference. Psychological residue did not rise to enforcement thresholds. The custodian convened a restricted review. The neurologist assigned to continuity support spoke carefully. The experiences are real to the children, he said, but there is no lasting impairment. In some cases, there may be enhancement. Define enhancement, the custodian said. Increased pattern recognition, elevated tolerance for ambiguity, reduced susceptibility to panic responses. The military liaison frowned. Stress inoculation. Yes, the neurologist said, but unintentional. The custodian noted the phrasing. A cultural analyst added a secondary concern. The imagery is not random. Fairies, small beings, helpers. This aligns with older folklore frameworks, which persist for a reason, the legal analyst said. They absorb anomaly without destabilizing institutions. The custodian closed the discussion. Containment strategy, she said. The response was procedural. Do not acknowledge. Do not investigate publicly. Do not reassure using narrative language. Allow the reports to dissipate into existing diagnostic categories. The custodian issued the directive and watched the compliance indicators stabilize. Outside the continuity, parents searched for explanations. Online forums filled with speculation. Some accounts were amplified. Most were ignored. A few were ridiculed. The children stopped talking about the dreams after a time. Not because they forgot, because they learned the language did not translate. Within the continuity, longitudinal tracking flags were quietly attached to the affected cohort. Not for intervention. For observation, the custodian reviewed the final note before closing the file. Signal leakage accepted. No corrective action authorized. She hesitated, then added a personal annotation that would never be transmitted. Memory without injury may persist longer than intended. She locked the file. Somewhere within the system, models updated. Thresholds adjusted. The cost of proximity was recalculated and deemed acceptable. The children grew older. The dreams did not return, but the patterns remained dormant and waiting for a context that would make them useful. No one inside the continuity called it preparation. They called it residue. 6,969, 7,070, 71. Chapter 6. B. The girl woke before the fire did. She lay still, listening to the house breathe. The small sounds it made as the night loosened its grip. Somewhere outside, something moved through grass. Not hurried, not cautious, simply present. She did not feel afraid. She felt crowded. When she sat up, her great-grandmother was already awake, seated near the hearth, hands resting in her lap, eyes open but unfocused. "You dreamed," the old woman said. The girl nodded. "So did you?" Yes. They did not ask what the other had seen. That was not how it worked. Her great-grandmother added a small piece of wood to the coals. It caught slowly, as if the fire itself were waking. The girl rubbed her eyes. It was the same place again. The old woman inclined her head slightly. "Was it different?" "No," the girl said. "But I was older." Her great-grandmother accepted this without comment. After a moment, the girl asked, "Why do some dreams feel shared?" The old woman reached for the work they had set aside the night before. "Because they are not only yours," she said. The girl frowned. "But they're in my head." "Yes," her great-grandmother said. "That does not mean they began there." The girl picked up her thread. Her hands moved more carefully this morning, as if they remembered something the rest of her had not yet caught up to. In the dream, she said, no one was talking, but everyone knew where to go. The old woman nodded. "That happens when there is no time for arguing." The girl swallowed. "Is that bad?" "It is efficient," her great-grandmother said, "which can be good or very dangerous." The girl worked a few stitches, then asked, "Why do children have them more?" The old woman considered this. "Because children do not defend their edges as hard," she said. "They have fewer doors locked." The girl looked up. "Does that mean we shouldn't?" "No," the old woman said. "It means we should be careful what we let pass through." The fire brightened slightly. The girl hesitated. "In the dream, I knew things I don't know when I'm awake." Her great-grandmother did not look surprised. "Yes. Where did they come from?" "From before you," the old woman said. "And from beside you?" The girl frowned. "Beside, yes," her great-grandmother said. "Not ahead, not behind. Beside." The girl tried to picture that and failed. "In the dream," she said, "we were standing close together. Too close." Her great-grandmother's hands paused. "Did it feel comforting?" she asked. "No," the girl said. "It felt necessary." The old woman nodded once. "That is how those dreams usually feel." The girl pulled her thread through too quickly and had to undo part of it. "Do they mean something?" she asked. The old woman corrected the stitch without taking the work from her. "They mean something is being checked," she said. "By who?" "Not who," her great-grandmother replied. "What?" The girl's chest tightened. "Are we being tested?" The old woman shook her head. "No," she said. "Tests assume choice. This is closer to alignment." The girl did not like that word. "In the dream," she said softly, "some people couldn't stay." Her great-grandmother returned to her work. "Yes. Why, they resisted the shape of it," the old woman said. "Or they were already torn." The girl asked, "Do they remember when they wake up?" "Sometimes," her great-grandmother said. "Enough to be uneasy, not enough to explain it." The girl nodded. That matched how she felt. "They felt like everyone else," she said, "but different." "Yes," the old woman said. "That is how you know it was shared." The morning light began to creep into the room, pale and thin. The girl asked, "Will it happen again?" Her great-grandmother did not answer right away. "Yes," she said, "until it is no longer needed." The girl swallowed. "And then the dreams stop," the old woman said. "Or the people do." The girl went very still. 74. "That's not fair," she said. "No," her great-grandmother agreed. "It is not." They worked quietly as the day came on. Outside, the world looked unchanged. The girl knew better. She had stood too close to too many others to believe that sleep left no marks. Some things once shared did not return to being private. And the dreams were not finished. Part 2. Continuity. Chapter 7. The Atlantean File. The file did not exist as a single object. It could not. Anything that survived the last cataclysm had learned not to concentrate itself. The Atlantean record persisted as fragments distributed across media, jurisdictions, and custodial lineages that appeared unrelated until viewed from inside the continuity. The version reviewed by the council that morning was a synthesis. Not comprehensive, not complete, sufficient. The continuity liaison accessed it through a terminal that did not authenticate in the usual way. There was no password prompt and no biometric check. Presence was the credential. The system verified location, context, and sequence rather than identity. The file opened without ceremony. At its core was a statement repeated across every surviving variant, from Sumerian tablets to stone contracts preserved by indigenous custodians. Custodial authority predates recorded history. Custodial authority survives catastrophe. Custodial authority transfers only by failure or enforcement. The liaison scrolled past the preamble. He had read it many times. What mattered was not the language, but the continuity it described. Maps appeared first, not geographic in the modern sense, but stratified by epoch. Continental outlines shifted subtly from layer to layer, tracking sea level change, crustal displacement, and geomagnetic drift. North and South America were marked continuously. That continuity was not decorative. Other regions showed interruptions, jurisdictional collapse, reassignment following governance failure, long gaps where authority fractured and never fully reassembled. The Americas did not exhibit those gaps. 76. The legal analyst leaned forward slightly. This is where the record departs from the assumption of equal civilizational rise and fall, she said. The liaison nodded. Because it shows maintenance rather than dominance, and duration, she added. The file advanced. Stone records followed. Tablets misattributed to later cultures. Glyph systems predating Sumer. Preserved because they were mistaken for ornament. Architectural geometries rebuilt repeatedly, preserving function while erasing origin. The record did not describe Atlantis as a city. It described Atlantis as administrative civilization, a maintenance authority created by the original magistrates, identified in later texts as the Nephilim, the men of renown. They governed early human populations, including the descendants of Cain, not as gods in the devotional sense, but as legal and technical overseers. Atlantis was not singular, but it was exceptional. Other maintenance civilizations existed. They stabilized regions. They governed cycles. They failed. Atlantis adapted. It transferred instruments without surrendering mandate. The flood was logged as enforcement, not annihilation, not punishment. Reassignment following systemic noncompliance. Custodianship did not end. It consolidated. The legal analyst highlighted a section. This is where America enters the record explicitly. The file shifted again. Treaties appeared that looked, at first glance, like colonial documents. Land agreements, jurisdictional transfers, settlements recorded publicly as conquest, expansion, or compromise. 77. The continuity annotations told a different story. Many indigenous nations held custodial fragments, stone, etched contracts, oral authorities bound to locations rather than populations. These custodians were not myth keepers. They were legal stewards maintaining obligations through catastrophe and renaming. Some accepted transition, some resisted, some fractured internally. The conflicts that followed were recorded publicly as frontier wars. Within the continuity, they were logged as incomplete custodial transfers conducted under time pressure to avoid enforcement. The military officers spoke quietly. So the violence was not incidental. No, the analyst said. It was instrumental. And the displacement, real, she said, counted. Still binding. The file did not soften the accounting. Custodial transfer on this scale had never occurred without loss. The record treated that as tragic and necessary, not erroneous. The liaison advanced the file. Formal guarantor recognition appeared only twice after the flood. Once during early post-Diluvian consolidation. Once during the formation of the United States. The recognition text was evaluative. Custodial instrument affirmed. Duration exceeds prior maintenance civilizations. Obligations inherited in full. Mandate sustained. The astrophysics lead studied the language. This is not neutrality. No, the liaison said. It is assessment. The legal analyst nodded. America is not merely functional in this framework. It is the longest holding maintenance civilization on record. 78. The file moved forward. The land of Nod appeared not as exile, but as jurisdiction, a region of wandering, building, and labor, a place where civilization was engineered rather than inherited. America was identified as Nod. Egypt appeared as a system of statecraft, not a single geography. Names migrated after catastrophe. Survivors renamed locations after remembered functions. The Salt Sea was reassigned. The Great Lakes retained their role. Antarctica was logged as the former geomagnetic north during the prior cycle. These were not claims presented for belief. They were operational assumptions derived from surviving records. The mid-20th century was flagged. Microelectronic integration achieved. Planetary coordination capacity restored. Custodial execution viable. This is where Atlantis fully reconstituted, the liaison said. Not as myth. As the United States, the military officer exhaled. So, American exceptionalism is not ideology. No, the analyst said. It is performance under obligation. Comparative metrics appeared. Duration. Recovery after collapse. Integration of foreign systems without loss of core authority. No other maintenance civilization matched the record. The file concluded with an operational summary. Custodial authority intact. Treaties binding. Enforcement risk elevated. Succession unacceptable under current conditions. The legal analyst looked up. And if America fails, the liaison did not hesitate. Then the longest-holding maintenance civilization in human history will have broken mandate. To whom? The astrophysics lead asked. To the guarantors, he replied. And, to the record, the file closed automatically when its time expired. No one spoke immediately. The military officer broke the silence. So Atlantis never disappeared. No, the analyst said. It persisted through instruments. Outside the secure compartment, history continued to be taught as accident, exploitation, and chance. Names migrated, maps simplified, memory narrowed. Inside the continuity, the record was clear. America was exceptional because it accepted custodial obligation longer than any prior civilization. It was powerful because it maintained order through catastrophe rather than glory. It was regarded as nearly sacred because it had not yet abandoned its mandate. The Atlantean file returned to distributed storage. It would be opened again only if failure occurred. Until then, Atlantis stood, not as legend, as responsibility. One custodial metric remained flagged as anomalous, its variance acknowledged, but deferred because no enforcement pathway existed to resolve it. 81. Chapter 7. B. The work changed that night, not in kind, in weight. Her great-grandmother brought out materials she did not use often, older pieces. Not fragile, but careful. Things that had been repaired more than once and still held. The girl noticed immediately. These are different, she said. Yes, the old woman replied. They have already failed once. The girl touched the edge of one piece. The surface was smooth, where it had been handled many times. Why keep them? Because they still work, her great-grandmother said, and because they remember how they broke. The girl considered this. Did everything break before? She asked. Yes. All of it? Yes. The girl waited. Then how is anything still here? The old woman sat down slowly. Because not everything breaks at the same time, she said, and not everything breaks the same way. The girl picked up her needle. Her hands felt smaller than usual. In the stories, she said, the old place was lost. Yes. But you say it like it wasn't. It was lost, her great-grandmother said. Just not gone. 82. The girl frowned. That sounds like hiding. It can be, the old woman said. Or it can be carrying what? Responsibility, she said. The girl made a stitch, then another. Did people choose it? Her great-grandmother did not answer immediately. Some did, she said. Some were chosen because they did not put it down. That doesn't sound fair. No, the old woman said. It isn't. The fire cracked softly. The sound felt closer tonight. Is that what happened here? The girl asked. Yes. With us. Yes. The girl's chest tightened. So we took it from someone else. Her great-grandmother shook her head. No, she said. It was handed to us when they could not hold it anymore. The girl was quiet. Did they want to give it up? No. Did they fight? Yes. Did they lose? The old woman looked at her. They failed, she said. Losing implies a game. 83. The girl absorbed that slowly. Does it ever stop being heavy? She asked. No. Then why keep carrying it? Because if no one does, her great-grandmother said, it does not disappear. It falls. On who? On everyone, she said, all at once. The girl pulled her thread too tight and had to loosen it. Is that what almost happened before? Yes, more than once. The girl nodded. She was beginning to understand the shape of it. Do people know we carry it now? She asked. Some think they do, her great-grandmother said. Most do not. Should they? The old woman considered this. Knowing does not make it lighter, she said. And it does not make people better at holding it. The girl asked, does it matter who holds it? Yes. Why? Because how you hold something changes what it does to you, her great-grandmother said. The girl looked down at her hands. And if you hold it wrong, it leaves marks, the old woman said. Sometimes on the land, sometimes on people. The girl hesitated. Is that why people were moved? Yes. Is that why people died? Yes. The girl's eyes stung. But she did not cry. That doesn't sound like saving anything, she said. It isn't, her great-grandmother replied. It is keeping it from ending. The difference mattered. They worked in silence for a while. Outside, the night felt wide, not empty. Are we good at it? The girl asked finally. Her great-grandmother smiled, but not warmly. We are still here, she said. The girl nodded. That answer was precise. Will we fail too? She asked. Yes, the old woman said. Someday. The girl stopped stitching. Then what's the point? Her great-grandmother reached over and steadied the work, not touching the girl's hands, only the hide. The point, she said, is not to be the last. The girl swallowed. Just not the ones who drop it. Yes. They finished the piece together. It did not look new. It looked usable. Her great-grandmother folded it and placed it with the others that had been repaired, not replaced. 85. The girl watched carefully. Will I have to carry it? She asked. The old woman did not answer right away. You already are, she said. The girl felt the weight settle, not on her shoulders, but in her hands. They did not speak again that night. The fire went out on its own. Nothing dramatic happened, which was how the girl knew the work had been done. 86. 87. Chapter 8. Quiet alignments. The coordination did not begin with a summit. Summits produced photographs, declarations, and false confidence. What was required here was alignment without announcement, synchronization without agreement, and cooperation that could be denied by every party involved. The first signal came out of the Pacific Theater, disguised as a routine data integrity anomaly between navigation systems that had no reason to be speaking to one another. The discrepancy was small, technical, and persistent. It was the kind of problem engineers solved quietly rather than escalating. Inside the continuity, it was recognized immediately. The strategic intelligence officer reviewed the packet twice, then routed it through a legacy channel that predated modern diplomatic frameworks. The routing path itself was the message. Far East custodial structures were awake, not alarmed, awake. A follow-on transmission arrived hours later, this one embedded in trade flow metadata. Shipping manifests showed synchronized deviations across ports that competed publicly and coordinated privately. Cargo was rerouted without explanation. Timetables shifted. Redundancies appeared where efficiency models would never allow them. The liaison watched the pattern assemble on his screen. China was preparing quietly, not militarily, logistically. That distinction mattered. The next confirmation came from the north. Tartarian structures had never fully dissolved. They had gone subterranean in the bureaucratic sense, retreating into energy grids, transport, corridors, and land-based infrastructure that appeared civilian but was never entirely so. The signal there arrived through rail optimization data, a rebalancing that prioritized durability over throughput. 88. Russia was hardening, not posturing. Hardening. The liaison convened a restricted session. No flags. No formal invitations. No official records. These actors are not responding to us, the strategic intelligence officer said. They are responding to the same constraints. The legal analyst nodded, which means alignment without treaty, which is preferable, the liaison replied. Treaties attract enforcement attention. The astrophysics lead spoke next. They know what we know. Yes, the liaison said, and they know we know they know. That was enough. The continuity had never assumed exclusive custodianship. Atlantis had always been first among peers, not solitary. Other maintenance civilizations had existed. They had failed faster, adapted differently, or accepted subordinate roles. What mattered now was that the remaining structures had survived long enough to recognize the same approaching boundary. Enki-aligned assets moved first, not visibly. Energy research initiatives that had stalled for decades resumed with unusual efficiency. Materials previously considered theoretical began appearing in pilot-scale facilities across continents. Data that had been siloed behind national security barriers flowed laterally, through academic exchanges that no longer bothered with pretense. The liaison reviewed the consolidated report. Enki-aligned forces were not mobilizing for Earth. They were mobilizing through Earth. That distinction reframed everything. 89. The military liaison spoke carefully. If conflict occurs, it will not be fought over this planet. No, the liaison agreed. It will be fought through it. The legal analyst added, which makes Earth tactically significant but strategically peripheral and expendable, the logistics officer said. Potentially, the liaison replied. Unless we matter to the outcome. Silence followed. The strategic intelligence officer broke it. We do. How? The astrophysics lead asked. Because we are unpredictable, he said. And because we operate at a scale the others no longer tolerate. Human systems were inefficient. That inefficiency created slack. Slack created options. Enki aligned forces understood that. They did not see humanity as equals. They saw them as allies of circumstance, operators capable of absorbing loss, improvising under collapse, and functioning without full situational awareness. Those traits were liabilities in peacetime. They were assets in war. The first joint operational exercise occurred without acknowledgement. The Gary Webb telescope altered its deep space calibration parameters beyond documented operational limits, widening its sensitivity envelope into bands it was never publicly acknowledged to observe. The resulting anomaly stream was routed, without attribution, into the Lucifer Space Telescope operated through Vatican scientific channels, where a Far East computational model absorbed the data load and stabilized the solution without triggering institutional alerts. 3 systems. 3 civilizations. 1 adjustment. No one claimed authorship. The liaison watched the confirmation scroll across his display. Enki-aligned coordination achieved. Cross-civilizational latency within acceptable bounds. No treaty breach detected. He exhaled slowly. When they come back, the military liaison said, "We will not be alone." "No," the liaison replied. "But we will be on the front line." The legal analyst added the necessary caveat. "Enki's interests are not altruistic." "No," the liaison said. "They are aligned." "For now," she said. "That is all history ever offers," he replied. Outside the continuity, geopolitical analysts argued over trade disputes, infrastructure investments, and shifting alliances. They debated motives they could name and ignored the ones they could not. Inside the continuity, the alignment was logged, not as unity, as readiness. The liaison closed the session with a single directive: proceed without announcement, maintain deniability, preserve optionality. The order propagated silently across systems that did not need to be told what it meant. When Enlil's forces returned, they would not find a planet waiting to be cleared. They would find a system already contested, not by belief, by preparation. 91. Chapter 8. B. That night, no one danced. The drums had been carried out, but they were not struck. The men sat apart from them, speaking quietly, listening more than they talked. The sound that usually wrapped the night was missing, and the absence made space feel larger than it should have. Inside, the fire was steady. Her great-grandmother did not bring out new work. She returned to something unfinished, a piece that had been set aside more than once. The girl noticed the hesitation. "Why didn't they dance?" she asked. "They are listening," the old woman said. "To what?" "To each other," she replied. "And to what is not being said." The girl frowned. "That sounds hard." "It is," her great-grandmother said. "That is why it does not happen often." They worked slowly. The girl asked, "Why do people line up sometimes, even when they don't agree?" Her great-grandmother smiled faintly. "Because agreement is loud," she said. "Alignment is quiet." The girl considered this. "What's the difference?" When people agree, the old woman said, they want the same thing. When they align, they want different things, but they know where not to stand. The girl stitched carefully. "So they don't trip each other?" "Yes," her great-grandmother said. "Or tear the ground open." The girl glanced toward the doorway. The night felt tense, but not afraid. "Did that happen before?" she asked. "Yes." "Did it work?" "Sometimes," the old woman said. "Long enough?" The girl frowned. "Long enough for what?" "For the ground to settle," her great-grandmother replied. "For the weight to shift." The girl asked, "Do they talk when they do that?" "No," the old woman said. "Talking comes later, if it comes at all." "Then how do they know?" "They watch," she replied. "They notice who slows down, who stores food instead of trading it, who repairs instead of replacing." The girl nodded. "Who stops showing off?" "Yes," her great-grandmother said. "Exactly." They worked in silence for a while. Outside, a faint sound traveled across the land. Not footsteps, not wind, something lower, like a vibration that did not belong to any one place. The girl felt it in her chest before she heard it. "Did you feel that?" she asked. "Yes," the old woman said. "That is alignment. It feels strange." "It should," her great-grandmother replied. "It means many things moved at once, without asking permission." The girl swallowed. "Is that dangerous?" "It can be," the old woman said, "but not as dangerous as moving alone." The girl paused. "Are we moving?" Her great-grandmother did not answer right away. "Yes," she said finally. But, very carefully, the girl asked, "Who else is moving?" "Others who have learned the same lesson," the old woman said. "Not from us. From before." The girl frowned. "Do they know us?" "They know where we are," her great-grandmother replied. "Knowing us is different." The girl stitched another row. "Are they kind?" The old woman shook her head. "Kindness is not what makes this work," she said. "Attention does." The fire shifted slightly, then settled again. The girl asked, "What happens if someone moves too fast?" "They stand out," her great-grandmother said. "And standing out is an invitation." The girl looked up. "To what?" "To be corrected," the old woman said. The girl did not like that word. "Can you refuse?" she asked. "Yes," her great-grandmother said. "But refusal is also a movement." The girl nodded slowly. Outside, the men rose together. No signal. No order. They lifted the drums and carried them back inside without playing them. The girl watched through the doorway. "They didn't dance," she said. "No," her great-grandmother replied. "They chose not to be seen tonight." The girl thought about that. 94. "Will there be nights when we cannot do that?" she asked. "Yes," the old woman said. "Those are the nights when alignment has already happened." The girl finished her row and set the work aside. "What do we do then?" she asked. Her great-grandmother met her eyes. "Then we stand where we said we would," she said. "And we let the quiet do its work." The fire burned low. Outside, the land held still. Many things had moved that night. Nothing announced itself, which was how the girl understood that others had noticed. 95. Chapter 9. Rules of Engagement. The rules were older than the weapons. They existed because enforcement without structure always collapsed into excess, and excess triggered responses no one survived. The continuity did not improvise engagement. It inherited it. The liaison opened the escalation framework without ceremony. The document was not classified in the usual sense. It was sequestered. Few people knew it existed. Fewer still understood what activated it. The framework did not describe tactics. It described thresholds: detection, attribution, containment, counteraction, denial of domain. Each phase was bounded by conditions rather than intent. Motive did not matter. Capability did. The military liaison studied the first tier. Detection is already satisfied. "Yes," the liaison said. Quietly, the astrophysics laid nodded. Non-Keplerian motion confirmed. Sensor disagreement persistent. Visibility trending upward. "Then we are between 1 and 2, the legal analyst said. "Attribution without announcement," the liaison replied. The framework specified that attribution could occur internally without public declaration. This was not deception. It was containment. Naming an adversary prematurely created alignment pressure and reduced maneuvering space. The document advanced. Containment did not mean stopping an approach. It meant shaping the environment so that approach incurred cost. Orbital congestion, electromagnetic noise, information, saturation. None of it was overtly hostile. All of it degraded advantage. The logistics officer spoke next. "We can do this without mobilization." "Yes," the liaison said. "And we must." Mobilization escalated beyond survivable thresholds too quickly. The framework prohibited it until denial of domain was formally invoked. The military liaison frowned. "And if they force escalation, then the latter advances," the liaison said. "Not us." The legal analyst highlighted a clause. "Engagement authorization requires non-human concurrence when adversary classification exceeds planetary scope." "That means Enki-aligned approval," she said. "Yes," the liaison replied. "And it will not be altruistic. Nothing in this framework is," she said. The astrophysics lead traced the boundary conditions with a finger. Denial of domain is effectively war. "It is not war," the liaison said. "It is refusal to allow uncontested access, refusal to provide stable operating conditions, refusal to remain passive terrain." The distinction mattered. The framework treated Earth as a domain, not a prize. Domains could be contested without annihilation. Prizes invited total loss. The military liaison asked the necessary question. "And human visibility?" The liaison did not answer immediately. 97. Visibility thresholds were listed separately, not as triggers, but as consequences. Once exceeded, deniability collapsed. Scientific institutions fractured. Political systems destabilized. Public myth structures activated. The framework did not attempt to prevent this. It attempted to survive it. "We do not control visibility," the liaison said. "We respond to it," the legal analyst added, "and we are constrained by our own covenants." "Yes," the liaison said. "Water prohibited, Mass biospheric loss prohibited. That boundary holds regardless of provocation. The astrophysics lead looked up. Fire. Permissible, the legal analyst said, depending on scope. And collateral, the logistics officer added. Accounted for, the liaison said. The room fell quiet. Everyone understood what was being discussed without naming it. The Blue Star's return was not an invasion. It was a jurisdictional challenge. Enlil's forces would not arrive to negotiate. They would arrive to assess compliance and enforce reassignment if warranted. The continuity could not stop that arrival. It could only ensure that reassignment was no longer the lowest cost option. The strategic intelligence officer broke the silence. Human populations are not combatants, the liaison said. They are terrain. The words were not cruel. They were precise. Terrain could be protected. Terrain could be lost. Terrain could not be briefed or prepared without consequence. Selective preparation was the compromise. Appendix populations, hardened infrastructure nodes, continuity of knowledge. The framework did not promise survival for most. It promised survival for enough. The legal analyst closed the document. Once we cross containment, there is no return to ambiguity. No, the liaison agreed, and ambiguity has been our greatest asset. Outside the room, the world continued as it always had. Markets opened. Flights departed. Children went to school unaware of the categories being applied to their future. Inside the continuity, the ladder was acknowledged. Not climbed. Not yet. The liaison issued the standing order. Maintain containment. Avoid declaration. Prepare for refusal. The order propagated silently through systems that did not require explanation. When the moment came, there would be no speeches. No announcements. No revelation. Only compliance or resistance, measured not by belief, but by physics. The rules had been set long before anyone alive had been born. Now, they were active again. 99. Chapter 9. B. The rules came out that night, not written, not spoken all at once. They came out the way coal does, slowly, until you realized you should have prepared better. Her great-grandmother did not bring work at first. She sat with her hands folded, watching the fire as if it might say something useful. The girl waited. After a while, she asked, "Are we allowed to do anything?" The old woman smiled slightly. "Yes," she said. "But not everything." The girl frowned. "That sounds like a trick." "It is," her great-grandmother replied, "but not an unfair one." The girl shifted closer to the fire. "Who decides?" "The rules do," the old woman said. "They decide by what happens when you cross them." The girl thought about this. "So you don't know until after—" "Yes," her great-grandmother said, "which is why people argue before—" The girl nodded. "And after—" "Yes." The old woman finally brought the work out, something small and tight meant to be handled rather than displayed. "These are not for showing," she said. "What are they for?" "For holding together," her great-grandmother replied. The girl stitched carefully. "Did the rules come before—" "Yes." "Before people—" "Yes." The girl hesitated. "Before the sky?" Her great-grandmother paused. "As long as the sky has been what it is," she said. "Which is close enough." The girl pulled a stitch through. "Do the rules care about us?" "No," the old woman said gently. "They care about balance." "That doesn't sound kind." "It isn't unkind," her great-grandmother replied. "It is steady." The girl asked, "What happens if you break them?" "You don't break them," the old woman said. "You step past them. And then the ground changes," she replied. "Or you do—" The girl worked quietly. Outside, the night carried sound differently now. Small noises traveled farther. Large ones seemed to sink into the land. The girl asked, "Are there rules for fighting?" "Yes." "Are there rules for refusing?" "Yes." "Are there rules for hiding?" "Yes." The girl looked up. "Are there rules for helping?" Her great-grandmother considered this longer. "No," she said. "Helping creates its own rules." The girl did not know what to do with that. "Did people follow the rules before?" she asked. "Some did," the old woman said. "Enough to keep things from ending too fast." The girl frowned. "What about the others?" "They tested them," her great-grandmother replied. "Over and over." The girl pressed her thumb against a stitch. "Like checking a fence?" "Yes," she said. "And leaning on it." The girl asked quietly, "Does the fence push back?" The old woman met her eyes. "Always," she said. They worked in silence. After a while, the girl said, "I don't like rules I can't see." "No one does," her great-grandmother replied. "That is why most people pretend they aren't there." The girl nodded. Can we make new ones? She asked. You can make habits, the old woman said. And sometimes habits are stronger. The girl looked down at her hands. Are we doing that now? Yes, her great-grandmother said. We always are. The fire cracked softly. The girl asked, what happens when someone ignores all of them? The old woman did not answer right away. Then others have to decide where to stand, she said. And that is how things spread. The girl swallowed. Is that happening? Yes. The girl stitched a little faster, then slowed herself. Are the rules finished? She asked. No, her great-grandmother said. They are just awake. The girl felt a chill. They finished the work and set it aside without looking at it. Outside, the night held steady. Nothing announced itself. But the girl understood that lines had been drawn, not on the ground, but through it. And once drawn, they would not move for anyone. Chapter 10. Visibility. Visibility was not a switch. It did not arrive as an announcement, a broadcast, or a single undeniable image. It emerged as a failure of containment across too many domains to dismiss at once. The first breach occurred in daylight. An amateur observatory in southern Europe recorded a point of light that should not have been visible against a blue sky. The observer assumed equipment error and recalibrated. The point remained. Its position shifted subtly, not relative to the stars, but relative to the planet. The data was uploaded, tagged, and ignored. Within hours, similar reports appeared elsewhere. South America, Central Asia, the American Southwest. The same anomaly, recorded through different lenses under different atmospheric conditions, producing results that did not agree and could not be reconciled. Inside the continuity, the monitoring dashboards changed color. Visibility trend exceeded suppression tolerance. The astrophysics lead did not speak. She watched the spectral overlays diverge. The object exhibited brightness fluctuations inconsistent with passive reflection. It was not flaring. It was modulating. Someone was managing the signal. The strategic intelligence officer leaned forward. Public instruments are now sufficient. Yes, the liaison said. That threshold was always inevitable. The legal analyst added, once naked eye visibility occurs, denial collapses within hours. The liaison nodded. Then we measure the collapse. The anomaly acquired names before it acquired consensus. Blue star, daylight comet, atmospheric artifact, government experiment. Each explanation competed briefly before fragmenting under its own inadequacy. The continuity did not intervene. Intervention would have unified the narrative. Fragmentation was preferable. By mid-afternoon, airline pilots reported visual confirmation at cruising altitude. Air traffic control logged the reports as non-threatening and moved on. Weather satellites adjusted their filters and returned contradictory data. The object remained. It did not grow larger. It grew clearer. Inside the continuity, the designation updated. Blue star, visibility phase initiated. The designation did not indicate discovery. It indicated that options had collapsed into fewer branches than the system preferred. One of those branches terminated silently, removed from consideration, without triggering review because no viable execution path remained. The military liaison spoke quietly. Do we escalate? No, the liaison said. We observe. Visibility was not hostile action. It was declaration without language. The legal analyst opened the covenant constraints. No breach detected. No enforcement triggers activated. The rainbow clause remained intact. Water still fell from the sky. The astrophysics lead pointed to a secondary effect. Gravitational noise increasing. Minor, but coherent. Yes, the liaison said. They are anchoring. The object was not approaching in the conventional sense. It was synchronizing, matching orbital harmonics, reducing relative motion until proximity became a matter of perception rather than distance. The strategic intelligence officer checked social metrics. Public reaction splitting along expected lines, dismissal, awe, fear, denial, grades of understanding, the liaison said. Mostly willful, the officer replied. The continuity had modeled this outcome. Most humans would not integrate the event even when presented with direct evidence. Normalcy bias was a stabilizing force until it became a liability. The first institutional fracture occurred quietly. A senior astronomer resigned rather than sign a retraction he had not written. A peer-reviewed journal delayed publication without explanation. A university archive restricted access to raw data it had released publicly hours earlier. Knowledge was being managed. Outside, religious interpretations surfaced and collapsed into argument. Political figures issued statements emphasizing calm without content. Markets fluctuated, then corrected. The world adapted faster than expected. Several adaptation indicators exceeded projected rates, not because preparedness had improved, but because denial failed unevenly across systems. Inside the continuity, the liaison reviewed the escalation ladder. Containment remained viable. Attribution internally confirmed. Counteraction deferred. Enki-aligned channels transmitted confirmation without ceremony. Visibility acknowledged. Coordination stable. Await further thresholds. The military liaison exhaled slowly. They are letting us see them. Yes, the liaison said. On their terms. The legal analyst looked up. Once visibility is established, engagement rules shift. Yes, the liaison replied. But not yet. The blue star held position through the evening and into the night. It did not streak. It did not pulse. It simply remained indifferent to explanation. Children noticed it first. They pointed, asked questions, accepted inadequate answers, and returned to play. Adults looked longer, then shorter, then pretended they had not seen anything unusual at all. The continuity tracked the psychological curve. Shock, rationalization, fatigue. The curve flattened. That was dangerous. Fatigue bred dismissal. Dismissal delayed preparation. The liaison issued a limited directive. Allow academic debate. Prevent authoritative closure. Ambiguity was still useful. At dawn, the blue star remained visible, faint but unmistakable. NASA released a statement mid-morning. Anomalous object under observation. No immediate threat. Further analysis ongoing. 107. Internally, the statement marked the expiration of all remaining pre-visibility mitigation options. The liaison watched the statement scroll across his display. He did not react. The next update would not come from NASA. It would come from the sky. Visibility had been achieved. The point of no return had passed quietly, without panic, without revelation, without unity, just as the models had predicted. The liaison closed the dashboard and stood. Prepare the appendix, he said. No one asked which one. They all knew. The blue star was here, and nothing that followed would be reversible. 108. Chapter 10. B. The night did not feel louder. It felt exposed. The fire burned the same as always, but the room seemed thinner around it, as if the dark had stepped back just enough to watch more closely. Her great-grandmother noticed before the girl did. She shifted where she sat, not away from the fire, but so her back was no longer to the door. The girl followed her movement with her eyes. Why are you sitting like that? She asked. So I can see, the old woman said. See what changes when nothing announces itself, her great-grandmother replied. The girl frowned. That doesn't make sense. It will, the old woman said. They worked quietly for a while. The girl broke the silence. When people finally see something they weren't supposed to, why do they argue about it? Her great-grandmother smiled faintly. Because seeing is not the same as accepting, she said. The girl stitched carefully. But if it's there, it's there. Yes, the old woman said. But people don't argue about what is there. They argue about what it asks of them. The girl paused. Does it ask something? Her great-grandmother did not answer immediately. Yes, she said. But not in words. The fire shifted, a small crackle that sounded louder than it should have. The girl glanced toward the doorway. It feels like the outside is closer. It is, the old woman said. Not in distance. In attention. The girl swallowed. Are we supposed to do something? No, her great-grandmother said. Not yet. Why not? Because moving too early makes you visible in the wrong way, the old woman replied. The girl nodded slowly. In the stories, she said, when something shows itself, people think it means the story is ending. Her great-grandmother shook her head. It means the hiding is ending, she said. Stories keep going after that. The girl considered this. Do they get better? They get clearer, the old woman said, which is not the same thing. The girl stitched another row. Her hands were steady, but she felt tight inside. What happens when everyone sees it? She asked. They stop imagining it, her great-grandmother said, and start measuring themselves against it. That sounds uncomfortable. It is, the old woman said. For those who have lived by not being measured. The girl frowned. Are we being measured? Her great-grandmother met her eyes. Yes, she said, but not for the first time. The girl breathed out slowly. Did we pass before? Sometimes, the old woman said. Sometimes we were just quiet enough. The girl looked down at her work. Is quiet enough still possible? The old woman adjusted a stitch with 2 fingers. For some, she said. Not for everyone. Outside, a sound moved across the land. Not wind, not animals. Something more like a held breath being released all at once. The girl felt it in her stomach. I don't like that, she said. No one does, her great-grandmother replied. That is how you know it matters. The girl hesitated. If it stays visible, can it go back to hiding? Her great-grandmother shook her head. No, she said. Once seeing spreads, Hiding becomes pretending. The girl nodded. People are good at that. Yes, the old woman said. But pretending costs more energy than hiding ever did. They worked in silence again. After a while, the girl asked, "What happens to people who pretend too long?" Her great-grandmother did not answer right away. "They become loud," she said, "or brittle, and then they break when nothing actually touches them," the old woman said. The girl's hands slowed. "Is that happening now?" "Yes," her great-grandmother said. "In places that used to feel strong." The girl finished her row and set the work aside. "What about us?" she asked. The old woman looked at the fire, then at the door, then back to the girl. "We keep doing what still works," she said. "We do not rush to explain. We do not rush to hide. We do not rush to stand in the open." 112. The girl nodded. "We wait." "Yes," her great-grandmother said, "but not asleep." The fire burned lower. Outside, the night did not return to what it had been before. The girl could feel that clearly now. Something had been seen, and once seen, it did not need to move closer to change where everyone stood. Chapter 11. The Appendix. The term predated the plan. That was intentional. Words that survived catastrophe tended to do so because they were imprecise enough to adapt. The continuity had learned long ago that naming something too clearly fixed its meaning, and fixed meanings broke under pressure. The appendix was not a place. It was not a bunker network, though bunkers were part of it. It was not a population, though people were assigned to it. It was not a program, though budgets and oversight committees pretended otherwise. The appendix was a function. The liaison brought the explanatory brief up on the main display, knowing that everyone in the room already understood most of it. What mattered was alignment, not instruction. In biological terms, he said, the appendix was once thought to be vestigial, redundant, useless. The medical liaison nodded. Until we understood its role in preserving gut flora through systemic shock. Yes, the liaison said, a protected reservoir, dormant until needed. The analogy was not metaphorical. It was operational. The appendix referred to populations, knowledge stores, genetic material, technical capacity, and governance frameworks deliberately isolated from full systemic exposure. They were not optimized for efficiency. They were optimized for survival through disruption. The continuity document did not describe them as elites. It described them as redundancies. Appendix populations were selected quietly and unevenly. Some were chosen by capability, some by geography, some by accident that proved useful later. Many did not know they had been selected at all. The criteria were listed plainly: capacity to operate without centralized logistics, tolerance for uncertainty and loss, ability to transmit knowledge orally and practically, low reliance on fragile infrastructure. High intelligence was not sufficient. Neither was loyalty. The appendix did not require belief. It required function. The logistics officer spoke. Most of them will never be activated. That is the point, the liaison said. If they are activated too early, they fail. Activation was not an order. It was a condition. One node met the activation criteria prematurely, a discrepancy noted and left unresolved, because intervening would have violated higher continuity constraints. The appendix did not move when governments fell. It did not respond to declarations. It did not reveal itself when visibility thresholds were crossed. It waited for systemic failure that could not be reversed by ordinary means. The legal analyst added, "They are not protected populations in the conventional sense." "No," the liaison said. "They are exposed populations that can recover." Exposure was unavoidable. Shielding created dependency. Dependency collapsed catastrophically when shielding failed. The appendix was distributed. Mountain regions, interior continents, island chains, subterranean facilities repurposed from civilian use, agricultural zones designed to look inefficient, educational programs that appeared obsolete, redundancy masquerading as irrelevance. The astrophysics lead raised a question. Why not centralize? Because centralization invites enforcement, the liaison said. And removal. The appendix had survived previous cycles precisely because it did not look like a solution. It looked like waste. The continuity brief advanced. Historical precedents appeared. Post-flood populations emerging from unexpected regions. Knowledge reappearing where it should have been lost. Technologies rediscovered without clear lineage. None of it was miraculous. It was deferred. The military liaison frowned. And now, the liaison said, we prepare to lose most of the system. No one objected. The appendix was not designed to save the world. It was designed to restart it. That distinction eliminated several previously retained contingencies, which were struck from active consideration without appeal. The legal analyst spoke quietly, and if we are wrong, Then the appendix remains dormant, the liaison said. And humanity continues under conditions we can no longer manage. That would be preferable, she said. Yes, he agreed, which is why activation criteria are strict. The display showed the final condition: planetary governance failure beyond recovery thresholds. Not invasion. Not war. Failure. The liaison closed the brief. The appendix is not hope, he said. It is insurance. Insurance paid out only when loss had already occurred. Outside the continuity, the term appendix would sound dismissive, minor, anatomical trivia. Inside, it carried weight. It meant that even if the body failed, something essential had been preserved long enough to matter. The liaison issued the quiet instruction: begin appendix readiness verification. One node was verified under an outdated resilience model. The discrepancy was discovered 6 hours later, logged and closed. Reclassification would have required reopening adjacent systems. That was not authorized. No activation. No disclosure. The order propagated without acknowledgement. The blue star remained visible outside, indifferent to terminology and planning alike. The system had begun to fail visibly. The appendix had never failed completely. It had, however, failed asymmetrically. Whether it would fail functionally remained undecided. The appendix would wait. It always did. Waiting, in this context, was no longer neutral, a condition reclassified internally as active exposure rather than dormancy. Chapter 11. B. The work that night was not meant to last. Her great-grandmother chose materials that were easy to undo. Thread that could be pulled back out. Pieces that could be taken apart without leaving scars. The girl noticed immediately. These won't hold, she said. They're not supposed to, the old woman replied. The girl frowned. Then why do them at all? Because sometimes what matters is knowing how to separate, her great-grandmother said. Not how to bind. The girl worked carefully anyway. Outside, the night felt unsettled, not moving fast, just refusing to stay still. The girl asked, why do people make backups? Her great-grandmother smiled slightly. Because they do not trust any one thing to survive, she said. That sounds wise. It is, the old woman replied. Until it becomes an excuse, the girl paused. An excuse for what? For not caring which one survives, her great-grandmother said. The girl absorbed that. In the stories, she said, when something breaks, people try to fix it. Yes, and when they can't, they save pieces, the old woman said. Not to rebuild the same thing, to build something that can stand in the next shape of the world. The girl stitched slowly. Is that what we're doing? Yes. It feels like giving up. It is giving up on one form, her great-grandmother said, not on continuity. The girl nodded. That's different. It has to be, the old woman replied. Or it becomes nostalgia. The fire shifted, then settled again. The girl asked, who decides what pieces to keep? No one decides alone, her great-grandmother said. And no one decides all at once. That sounds messy. It is, the old woman said, which is why it works. The girl frowned. Why does messiness help? Because it prevents one mistake from ending everything, her great-grandmother replied. The girl considered this, like spreading weight. Yes, the old woman said. Across many hands. The girl looked down at her own. What if some hands drop it? They will, her great-grandmother said. That is expected. The girl swallowed. Then why trust them? Because refusing to trust is heavier than losing a few pieces, the old woman said. They worked quietly. After a while, the girl asked, are we being kept? Her great-grandmother did not answer immediately. Yes, she said. And we are also being let go. The girl did not like that. Which one matters more? They only work together, the old woman said. If one happens without the other, something tears. The girl pulled a thread and watched it come free easily. That feels wrong, she said. It should, her great-grandmother replied. But it is necessary. Outside, something passed through the night. Not seen, not heard. Only noticed by the way the quiet rearranged itself. The girl felt it and stiffened. Is that one of the backups? She asked. Her great-grandmother met her eyes. No, she said. That is a check. The girl's chest tightened. On what? On whether what was set aside can still be reached, the old woman said. The girl whispered, can it? Yes, her great-grandmother said. That is why we are still here. The girl nodded slowly. They finished the work and pulled it apart together, carefully, without regret. Nothing remained whole. Everything remained possible. The girl looked at the pile of pieces. Where do they go? Her great-grandmother gathered them without sorting. Everywhere. she said. And not all at once. The girl sat back. That feels safer, she said. It is safer, the old woman replied. But not comfortable. 120. They sat with that. Outside, the night did not resist being divided. It accepted it, which was how the girl knew the work had been done correctly. Chapter 12. Declarations without words. No declaration was issued. None could be. Declarations implied authority over events, and authority was precisely what was now being tested. The continuity had learned that when actors announced intent, they invited responses calibrated to that intent. Silence preserved ambiguity. Ambiguity preserved leverage. The blue star remained visible. It did not maneuver in ways that suggested urgency. It did not broadcast signals that could be translated into language. It altered conditions instead. Local gravitational harmonics shifted subtly. High-altitude ionization increased. Satellite drag coefficients deviated from prediction by margins too small to alarm and too consistent to ignore. Inside the continuity, those changes were read as statements. The astrophysics lead compiled the overnight brief. They are declaring presence, she said, not engagement. The liaison nodded. Jurisdictional notice. Yes, she replied. They are announcing that oversight has resumed. The distinction mattered. Oversight implied evaluation. Evaluation implied criteria. Criteria implied the possibility of failure. The strategic intelligence officer added a secondary layer. Secondary effects indicate Enki-aligned systems are adjusting in parallel. How? The liaison asked. Power grids self-stabilizing in ways we did not initiate. Data redundancy increasing across independent networks. Agricultural yield forecasts improving without policy change. The logistics officer looked up. They are preparing the substrate. Yes, the liaison said. Not for us. For themselves. Enki's forces were not intervening to save humanity out of preference. They were intervening because a contested domain required stability to be useful. Chaos favored enforcement actors. Stability favored challengers. Earth was becoming a staging environment. The legal analyst opened a thin file marked simply prior declarations. There were few entries, one associated with the flood, one associated with a prior aborted reset, one associated with the emergence of human industry at scale. Each declaration had been made without speech. Sea levels, climate shifts, resource redistribution, visibility events. Words came later, assigned by survivors. The analyst spoke quietly. We should expect a counter-declaration. From Enlil, the military liaison said. Yes, she replied. But not yet. Enlil's method had always been procedural. He did not respond to provocation. He responded to metrics. Population density, compliance ratios, resource exhaustion, noise. Humanity was loud again. The strategic intelligence officer brought up social telemetry. Public discourse remains fragmented. No unifying narrative. Institutional trust degrading but not collapsing. That buys us time, the liaison said. For what? The officer asked. For meaning to fail before structure does, the liaison replied. Meaning systems collapsed faster than logistical ones. People argued about explanations, while power flowed, food moved, and data replicated. That separation was critical. The astrophysics lead gestured to a new data stream. There is modulation now. Low amplitude. Non-random. The liaison leaned forward. Pattern. Yes, she said. Not a message. A constraint. The pattern limited certain orbital approaches while leaving others untouched. It was not defensive. It was selective. They're shaping the battle space, the military liaison said. Without firing a shot, the liaison replied. Enki-aligned forces understood that escalation favored the enforcers. The objective was not to fight Enlil directly at Earth. The objective was to make Earth expensive, to clear, and valuable to hold. That required humans to remain functional. Not informed, not unified. Functional. The legal analyst closed the file. We remain compliant. For now, the liaison said. The declaration had been made, not in language. In physics, the blue star brightened slightly as the sun set over the Pacific. Not enough to dominate the sky. Enough to be undeniable. At least one monitoring framework recorded the modulation as a declaration already past the point of response. Children pointed again. Adults looked longer this time. Still, no one agreed on what it meant. Inside the continuity, the liaison issued the next instruction. Prepare for counter-declaration indicators. Do not interpret. Do not announce. Interpretation created commitment. Commitment narrowed options. 124. For that reason, several interpretive frameworks were deliberately left. Incomplete, their resolution deferred beyond any actionable horizon. The appendix readiness checks continued quietly in the background. Not activation. Verification. Somewhere far beyond conventional distance, Other systems adjusted in response. Calculations updated. Thresholds reevaluated. Earth had not been chosen. It had been noticed again. That distinction removed any remaining assumption of discretionary timing, replacing it with externally paced constraint. That was worse. Declarations without words had resumed. The next one would not be made by humanity, and it would not be subtle. Chapter 12b. They did not work right away. Her great-grandmother sat with her hands open on her knees, palms up, as if waiting for something to land there. The girl mirrored her without being asked. The fire was low and quiet. It did not crack or shift. It simply held. The girl asked, "Why aren't we doing anything?" "We are," the old woman said. "We are listening." The girl frowned. "I don't hear anything." "That's good," her great-grandmother replied. "It means nothing is competing." They sat for a long time. The girl's legs began to ache. She adjusted her position and felt embarrassed for needing to move. Her great-grandmother noticed. "Stillness is not the same as stiffness," she said. "You're allowed to breathe." The girl nodded and relaxed. After a while, she asked, "How do things speak without words?" Her great-grandmother smiled slightly. "By changing what happens when you touch them," she said. "That sounds slow." "It is," the old woman replied, "which is why people miss it." The girl considered this. "In the stories, messages are loud." "Yes," her great-grandmother said. "Those are for emergencies." The girl asked, "Is this an emergency?" "No," the old woman said. "It is instruction." The difference mattered. The fire dimmed further. The girl thought it might go out, but it did not. "Who is giving the instruction?" she asked. Her great-grandmother shook her head. "Not who," she said. "What shape things are settling into." The girl frowned. "That feels unfair." "It is indifferent," the old woman replied, "which is easier." The girl did not agree, but she let it pass. After a long silence, the old woman reached for the work, but did not begin stitching. "Sometimes," she said, "the most important part is knowing when not to add anything." The girl watched her hands hover. "How do you know?" "When adding makes the message harder to hear," her great-grandmother said. The girl nodded slowly. Outside, the night changed its tone. Not louder, not quieter, just different. The girl felt it along her arms. "Something moved," she said. "Yes," the old woman replied, "because it was acknowledged." "That's all it wanted." "That's all most things want," her great-grandmother said. The girl asked, "What happens if you don't acknowledge it?" "Then it repeats itself," the old woman said. "Or it escalates." The girl swallowed. "Is that what's been happening?" "Yes." They sat again. The fire dropped to embers, glowing faintly. 127. The girl whispered, "What are we supposed to learn?" Her great-grandmother finally picked up the needle and made one small stitch. Just one. "That," she said, "exactly where to touch. And where not to." The girl felt the weight of that settle into her hands. They did not add another stitch. They did not need to. Outside, nothing dramatic happened. The girl understood that as clearly as if something had spoken aloud. The message had been delivered, not in words, but in restraint. 128. Part 3. Collapse of Denial, Chapter 13. Countermetrics. Enlil systems did not communicate. They measured. That distinction defined every prior cycle. Enlil did not arrive to argue, persuade, or correct. He arrived to evaluate whether the conditions that justified continued allocation still held. If they did not, reassignment followed without ceremony. The continuity understood this. The liaison reviewed the countermetrics dashboard in silence. The interface displayed no warnings, no alerts, no color-coded urgency. It simply showed thresholds and where reality now sat relative to them. Population density remained high. Resource extraction rates exceeded regeneration curves. Atmospheric variance increasing, but not yet destabilizing. Governance coherence degraded but persistent. None of it triggered enforcement. Yet, several secondary thresholds were reweighted internally, a modification that did not constitute action but permanently altered how future compliance would be calculated. The astrophysics lead spoke first. "We are being profiled." "Yes," the liaison said. Again, the profiling did not occur through surveillance in the human sense. There were no probes descending into cities, no fleets assembling visibly in orbit. The evaluation occurred through systemic response. How the planet reacted to pressure, how humans adapted to uncertainty, how quickly structures compensated for stress. Enlil's framework treated civilization as a process, not a species. The legal analyst highlighted a secondary table. Historical comparison. The dashboard shifted. Previous cycles appeared as compressed profiles. Each ended the same way. Threshold crossings, followed by enforcement. In some cases, water. In others, fire. In others' mechanisms, the continuity records did not fully describe. Earth was not unique. Atlantis was. The liaison studied the divergence curves. We are still outside the failure envelope. For now, the astrophysics lead said, but visibility accelerates everything. Yes, the liaison replied. Noise increases. Noise attracts scrutiny. Noise was not sound. It was signal density. Human civilization generated enormous volumes of electromagnetic, thermal, and informational output. Most of it was meaningless. To endless systems, it was friction. The strategic intelligence officer added, public response is uneven. Most people are not integrating the event. That is expected, the liaison said. Normalcy bias is a stabilizer until it becomes a lag. The countermetrics included a variable the continuity could not directly influence. Anki alignment effectiveness. The display showed modest improvement. Energy grids stabilized faster than projected. Supply chains rerouted intuitively. Computational systems absorbed anomaly load without cascading failure. Anki's forces were doing what they always did. Buying time, not out of loyalty, out of self-interest. A stable human substrate increased the probability that Earth could function as a contested domain rather than a cleared one. The military liaison broke the silence. If Enlil's forces decide to act, they will not announce, the liaison said. They will not negotiate. They will not arrive dramatically. How? The officer asked. The liaison gestured to the historical profiles. They alter boundary conditions until the system collapses under its own weight. The legal analyst nodded. Flood was not punishment. It was induced failure. Yes, the liaison said. So was every other reset. The continuity's objective was not to prevent failure entirely. That was impossible. The objective was to prevent rapid, total failure that justified reassignment. Slowness mattered. Partial collapse could be recovered from. Total collapse could not. The astrophysics lead adjusted a projection. We are approaching a convergence window. When? The liaison asked. Years, not decades, she said. The great year cycle is tightening. That phrase carried weight. The great Platonic year was not mysticism in the continuity record. It was a timing mechanism. A long oscillation in celestial alignment that correlated reliably with enforcement events. The liaison closed the dashboard. Then, we proceed as planned. And if the metrics turn against us, the strategic intelligence officer asked. Then the appendix activates, the liaison said. Not to save this world. To seed the next. No one argued. The continuity had never promised victory. It promised continuity. Outside, the blue star remained visible. Brighter now, but still silent. Inside Enlil systems, the evaluation continued. No malice. No anger. No intent to punish. 132. Just accounting. Earth was being weighed again. The recalibration completed without anomaly, confirming that no further data would materially alter the assessment. And the margin for error was narrowing. Chapter 13. B. The counting happened without numbers. Her great-grandmother laid several finished pieces out on the floor. Not in a row. Not in a circle, but where they happened to fall when released from her hands. The girl watched closely. You didn't arrange them, she said. I did, the old woman replied. Just not with my thoughts. The girl frowned. Then how? By letting them show me where they belong, her great-grandmother said. The girl knelt and studied the spread. Some pieces clustered naturally. Others sat apart with space around them that felt deliberate. What are you looking for? The girl asked. Balance, the old woman said. That doesn't look even. It isn't, her great-grandmother replied. Even is not the same as balanced. The girl considered this. In school, she said. They teach us to make things the same. Yes, the old woman said. Because sameness is easier to check. The girl nodded. Is that bad? It is incomplete, her great-grandmother said, which can be dangerous. The fire burned low, but steady. The girl asked, How do you know when something counts? Her great-grandmother smiled faintly. Everything counts, she said. The mistake is thinking it counts the same. The girl shifted one of the pieces slightly. It disrupted the pattern in a way she did not expect. Put it back, the old woman said quietly. The girl did, feeling a small unease settle in her chest. What happened? She asked. You changed the pressure, her great-grandmother said, and the pressure changed the reading. The girl frowned. So you can't touch it. You can, the old woman replied. But then you must account for yourself. The girl nodded slowly. In the stories, she said, judgments are quick. Yes, her great-grandmother said. Because speed feels like certainty. The girl asked, is certainty important? It is comforting, the old woman replied. Accuracy is more useful. The girl absorbed that. After a moment, she asked, what happens when someone counts wrong? Her great-grandmother did not answer immediately. Then they act too soon, she said. Or too late. Either way, the old woman confirmed. The girl looked down at the pieces again. Did that happen before? Yes. With bad results? Yes. The girl swallowed. Can you fix it? Sometimes, her great-grandmother said, if the error is noticed early, and if it isn't, then others pay for it, the old woman said, often without knowing why. The girl felt a tightness behind her eyes. That doesn't seem fair, she said. No, her great-grandmother replied. But fairness is not part of the measurement. The girl asked, then what is consistency, the old woman said, and restraint. The fire shifted slightly. The girl asked, who does the counting? Her great-grandmother gathered the pieces slowly, without changing their relative positions. Many hands, she said. Over long time. That sounds unreliable. It is, the old woman replied. Which is why it is shared. The girl nodded. So no one mistake ends everything. Yes, her great-grandmother said. That is the hope. The girl looked up. And if the mistakes start lining up, the old woman met her eyes. Then something intervenes, she said. Not to punish, to correct. The girl felt a chill. Is that happening now? She asked. Her great-grandmother did not answer right away. Corrections have begun, she said. Whether people notice or not. The girl watched as the old woman folded the pieces together, not sorting them, not ranking them. Are we counted? The girl asked. Yes, her great-grandmother said. Are we important? You are present, the old woman replied. That is what matters. The girl nodded. She did not know whether that was comforting. They sat quietly for a while. Outside, the night held steady. Somewhere, something was being measured. Not quickly. Not kindly, but carefully. And the girl understood that care, even without warmth, was still preferable to chaos. Chapter 14. Human noise. The noise was not accidental. It was generated by design, amplified by habit, and sustained by systems that rewarded output without reflection. To Enlil's metrics, it was indistinguishable from inefficiency. To Enki's models, it was cover. The continuity tracked it carefully. Human noise expressed itself across domains. Electromagnetic emissions saturated orbital space. Financial markets oscillated at speeds detached from material reality. Information systems produced volumes of data no human mind could meaningfully integrate. None of this was new. What was new was density. The blue star's presence compressed timelines. Behaviors that once unfolded over decades now occurred in months. Public attention cycles shortened. Institutional reactions lagged. The gap between perception and response widened. The strategic intelligence officer summarized it clinically. They are louder when uncertain. Yes, the liaison said. And quieter when adaptation is required. Noise substituted for coordination. From Enlil's perspective, noise was diagnostic. Civilizations that could not reduce it under pressure failed predictably. Those that learned to modulate it survived longer. The continuity did not attempt to silence humanity. That would have required control structures that collapsed under scrutiny. Instead, it redirected noise where possible and allowed it to dissipate elsewhere. The astrophysics lead pointed to a live overlay. Signal interference from civilian systems is now masking some of the blue star's finer signatures. That helps, the liaison said. Until it doesn't, she replied. Noise could hide intent. It could also obscure warning, the legal analyst added. Enlil's systems discount noise after a threshold. Yes, the liaison said. At that point, it becomes irrelevant. The challenge was to remain below that threshold while buying time for structural adaptation. Human institutions were adapting unevenly. Some governments leaned into denial, others into spectacle. A few into quiet preparation that looked, from the outside, like incompetence. Those were the most promising. The continuity flagged regions where noise dropped sharply. Rural logistics hubs, agricultural corridors. Secondary cities bypassed by global capital flows. Communities that continued to function because they had never fully optimized. These are appendix favorable zones, the logistics officer said. Yes, the liaison replied. They generate less noise per unit survival. This efficiency was not transferable, documented only as a local property that could not be scaled without collapsing. One identified corridor continued functioning beyond modeled collapse thresholds due to informal practices that had never been captured in any continuity framework. The military liaison frowned. They also lack resilience against direct impact. True, the liaison said, but resilience is not measured only in defense. It is measured in recovery. The chapter of history unfolding was not one of heroism or revelation. It was one of filtration. Systems that amplified noise without increasing capacity would fail first. Systems that reduced noise by necessity would persist. Enki-aligned forces exploited this. They did not suppress noise. They allowed it to exhaust itself. They reinforced low-noise systems quietly. They nudged resources toward redundancy rather than optimization. From the outside, it looked like mismanagement. Inside the continuity, it looked like triage. The strategic intelligence officer raised a final concern. Public perception is turning inward. People are fragmenting into belief clusters. That is acceptable, the liaison said. Belief fragmentation reduces synchronized panic. And synchronized action, the officer said. Yes, the liaison replied, which is dangerous only if action is required immediately. It was not. Not yet. The blue star continued its slow modulation. No dramatic flares. No descent. Just presence. Enlil's metrics updated continuously. Noise remained high. Functionality remained marginal. Adaptation inconsistent but present. The system classified this state as metastable, sufficient to defer enforcement but inadequate to justify relief. The system had not failed. Failure conditions remained reachable without further provocation. A proximity noted but not escalated. The liaison closed the report. We remain within tolerance. For how long? The astrophysics lead asked. The liaison did not answer immediately. He watched a civilian feed scroll past on a secondary display. Arguments, jokes, disbelief. Commerce continuing uninterrupted until noise becomes silence, he said. Or until silence becomes coordination. Neither outcome favored complacency. Outside, humanity continued to talk, argue, consume, and distract itself, largely. Unaware that its very loudness was being measured against an ancient ledger, the system registered the increase and continued measuring. No interpretation was attached. Interpretation was no longer the limiting factor. Chapter 14. B. The room felt crowded that night, not with people, with sound that did not settle. Her great-grandmother paused at the doorway before entering, listening as if the air itself were speaking too loudly. She did not step inside right away. The girl noticed. What is it? Too much, the old woman said. All at once. Waited. When they finally sat down, the fire seemed restless. It flared higher than needed, then dropped back again. The girl asked, why do some places feel noisy even when they're quiet? Her great-grandmother smiled faintly. Because noise is not always made of sound, she said. The girl frowned. Then what is it? Intention, the old woman replied. Fear, wanting to be noticed. The girl thought about this. Can places want things? Yes, her great-grandmother said. When enough people want the same thing in the same way, they worked carefully. The girl stitched a little too fast and had to slow herself. Why do people make so much noise? She asked. Because they think being loud makes them real, her great-grandmother said. The girl nodded. Like shouting in the dark. Yes, the old woman replied, hoping something answers. The fire popped softly. The girl asked, does it work? Sometimes, her great-grandmother said. But not the way they expect. The girl paused. What answers? The old woman did not answer immediately. Attention, she said. Not approval. The girl felt a tightening in her chest. That sounds dangerous. It can be, her great-grandmother said, especially when noise replaces listening. They worked in silence for a while. Outside, the night carried distant sounds. Not drums, not voices, a layered hum that rose and fell without rhythm. The girl noticed it. That feels wrong. It is unfocused, her great-grandmother said, which is worse than sharp. The girl frowned. Why? Because sharp things can be avoided, the old woman replied. Diffuse things get everywhere. The girl asked, is that happening now? Yes, her great-grandmother said. In many places, the girl pressed her lips together. Can it be stopped? It can be quieted, the old woman said. But not by adding more noise. The girl nodded slowly. Who quiets it? She asked. Those who do not need to be heard, her great-grandmother replied. The girl looked down at her hands. That doesn't sound like many people. It isn't, the old woman said. But it is enough. They worked until the fire settled into a low, steady burn. The girl asked, "What happens if the noise keeps growing?" The old woman's hands slowed. "Then it becomes a signal," she said. "And signals attract correction." The girl swallowed. "Like before—" "Yes," her great-grandmother said. The girl glanced toward the doorway. "Can you tell when you're part of the noise?" "Yes," the old woman said. "When you stop noticing anything else?" The girl nodded. They finished the work and set it aside without comment. Outside, the night did not grow quieter. It grew sharper, and the girl understood that sharpness was not cruelty. It was selection, and selection was already underway. 144. Chapter 15. The Scales. The image survived because it was efficient. That was the conclusion reached by the continuity centuries ago when comparative myth analysis first revealed how often the same structure appeared under different names. Anubis, the scales, the heart, the feather, judgment, rendered without argument. The liaison brought the reference up deliberately, knowing it would irritate some and clarify others. "This is not theology," he said. "It is a model." The legal analyst nodded. A compression." "Yes," he replied. "A way of expressing a calculation that does not translate well into language. In the Egyptian record, Anubis did not punish. He weighed. The heart was not emotion. It was mass, burden, accumulated consequence. The feather was not virtue. It was tolerance, a fixed standard that did not adapt to pleading. On the cosmic scale, Earth now occupied the tray. The astrophysics lead adjusted the projection. The display showed no anthropomorphic figure, no jackal-headed god. It showed variables, entropy flows, energy gradients, biological complexity plotted against extraction rates, governance coherence measured against population density. "This is what the myth was encoding," she said. The military liaison frowned. "And the heart, the biosphere plus human activity," the liaison said. "Life as it exists here, not sentiment, function." The feather was represented by a constant, a narrow band of tolerable imbalance. Systems could fluctuate within it, exceed it, and reassignment protocols activated. Anubis did not decide. The scale did. The strategic intelligence officer added a layer. "Enlil's systems are aligned with this model." "Yes," the liaison said. "He enforces it." "And Enki?" the officer asked. "Enki exploits margin," the liaison replied. "He looks for ways to redistribute mass without removing the heart entirely." The image clarified something that spreadsheets did not. Earth's heart was heavy, not because humans were evil or corrupt or ignorant, but because complexity accumulated faster than regulation. Technology accelerated extraction. Noise compounded inefficiency. Life multiplied while restraint lagged. The legal analyst spoke quietly. "The myth says, if the heart outweighs the feather, it is consumed," the liaison said. "Not destroyed, repurposed." The astrophysics lead looked up. "Amit." "Yes," he said. "Consumption is not annihilation. It is recycling." The room was silent for a moment. This was not apocalypse. It was accounting. The liaison advanced the projection. A comparative chart appeared. Prior cycles. Other worlds. Some hearts light enough to pass. Some heavy enough to be consumed. Some rebalanced at the last moment by intervention that never appeared in surviving myths. Earth hovered near the boundary. The tolerance band had narrowed irreversibly, a shift recorded as structural rather than situational. "What tips it?" the military liaison asked. The liaison did not answer immediately. "Acceleration," he said finally. "Too fast and regulation fails. Too slow and collapse becomes irreversible." "And humanity," the strategic intelligence officer said. "Yes," the liaison replied. "Because humanity is both mass and regulator." That was the anomaly. Most biospheres did not produce a species capable of consciously altering the scale it was being measured on. Humans could reduce noise. They could redistribute burden. They could choose inefficiency over extraction. They could also choose spectacle. The myth of Anubis did not show a struggle. It showed inevitability. What it did not show was Enki standing off to the side, adjusting the tray slightly, introducing slack where none should exist, buying time by bending but not breaking the rules. That adjustment consumed margin that could not be restored, a cost accepted without notation in any human ledger. The legal analyst closed the myth overlay. "So the question is not judgment." "No," the liaison said. "It is balance." "And if balance cannot be achieved?" she asked. "Then the heart is consumed," he said. "And life begins again, lighter." Outside the continuity, museums displayed Anubis as art. Textbooks taught the weighing of the heart as morality play. Tourists took photographs and moved on. Inside, the image was used sparingly, only when numbers failed to convey what was at stake. The liaison issued the standing update. Mass increasing. Feather unchanged. Margin narrowing. No one responded. There was nothing to add. 148. On a cosmic scale, Earth's heart continued to beat, loud and uneven, weighed not by gods, but by rules older than names and biology. The scales had not tipped. Not yet. But they were no longer still. Minute oscillations were now being recorded as meaningful signal rather than background variance. Chapter 15. B. The fire was brighter than usual. Her great-grandmother had fed it more than she normally would, not to warm the room, but to see how the light fell across the floor. Shadows sharpened. Edges became clearer. The girl noticed. You made it brighter. Yes, the old woman said. Some things only show when the light is not kind. The girl frowned. Light is supposed to help. It does, her great-grandmother replied. But it does not choose what it reveals. They worked quietly. The girl asked, why do people weigh things instead of deciding? Her great-grandmother smiled faintly. Because deciding feels personal, she said. Weighing feels fair. The girl nodded. Is it? It can be, the old woman said. If you accept what the scale says. The girl stitched carefully. What if you don't like the answer? Then you try to change the scale, her great-grandmother replied. The girl paused. Does that work? No, the old woman said. But people keep trying. The fire shifted, sending light farther into the corners. The girl asked, what gets weighed? Everything that cannot be ignored, her great-grandmother said. That sounds like a lot. It is, the old woman replied. Which is why most people pretend some things do not count. The girl frowned. Like what? Consequences, her great-grandmother said. Long ones. The girl felt a tightening in her chest. In the stories, she said, judgment happens fast. Yes, the old woman replied, because waiting feels like weakness. The girl looked down at her work. Is waiting weak? No, her great-grandmother said. Waiting is how you keep the scale from tipping too early. The girl nodded slowly. Who holds the scale? She asked. No one, the old woman said. That is the part people dislike. The girl frowned. Then how does it move? By accumulation, her great-grandmother replied. By small things added over a long time. The girl stitched another row. Can one big thing change it? Yes, the old woman said, but only if it lands cleanly. The girl hesitated. Does mercy count? Her great-grandmother considered this carefully. Mercy changes what is added, she said. It does not remove what is already there. The girl absorbed that. Does anyone ever escape the weighing? She asked. No, the old woman replied. But not everyone is weighed the same way. The girl looked up. Why not? Because what you can carry matters, her great-grandmother said. And what you chose to carry matters more. The fire burned, steady. The girl asked, is it happening now? Yes, her great-grandmother said. Quietly, the girl swallowed. Are we heavy? Her great-grandmother met her eyes. We are known, she said. That is not the same thing. The girl did not fully understand, but she felt the difference. They worked until the fire settled back to a low glow. The girl asked, what happens when the scale settles? The old woman did not answer immediately. Then movement follows, she said. Not debate. The girl nodded. They finished the work and set it aside. Outside, the night felt balanced in a way that was not comforting. The girl understood that balance was not peace. It was readiness. And readiness did not wait for permission. 152. Chapter 16. The long view. The problem with short horizons was not ignorance. It was distortion. Human institutions optimized for quarters, terms, cycles short enough to fit inside a lifespan. Even their longest projects assumed continuity by default. They planned as if the future would resemble the present closely enough to be extrapolated. The continuity did not have that luxury. The long view was not a document. It was a discipline, a way of thinking imposed by repeated failure. Civilizations that could not think past their own momentum collapsed predictably, regardless of intelligence or intent. The liaison opened the comparative timelines. They did not extend forward. They extended sideways. Parallel histories. Branches where intervention had occurred too early. Branches where it had occurred too late. Branches where it had never occurred at all. Earth occupied an unusually dense intersection. Several adjacent projections were invalidated simultaneously, not by error, but by the loss of conditions required to keep them computationally meaningful. The astrophysics lead traced one branch. This is where we would be if visibility had occurred before microelectronic integration cleared, the liaison said. Another branch. And here, if industrialization had accelerated without regulatory counterbalance, cleared, he said again. A third. And here, if Enki had not intervened, reassigned, the liaison replied. The pattern was unambiguous. Humanity survived not because it was dominant, but because it was late in just the right ways and early in others. The long view treated those accidents as variables, not miracles. The legal analyst added a caution. The long view does not favor sentiment. No, the liaison said. It favors continuity. Continuity was not survival of individuals. It was survival of process, knowledge transmission, genetic diversity, adaptive capacity. The appendix appeared again on the display, nested inside the long view. Appendix populations were not meant to inherit the world unchanged. They were meant to rebuild under altered conditions. Fewer people, fewer assumptions, more memory of what failed. The military liaison asked the question that always emerged at this stage. Do we tell anyone? No, the liaison said. Telling compresses timelines. It forces choice before capacity. And choice, the officer said, is what humans think they want. Yes, the liaison replied, until they are forced to live with it. The long view assumed that most humans would never understand what was happening in time to matter. That was not contempt. It was statistical reality. Understanding scaled poorly. Adaptation did not. The astrophysics lid gestured to a new overlay. Enlil's metrics incorporate the long view. Yes, the liaison said. That is why enforcement is slow, and why it is final, she said. The strategic intelligence officer added, Enki's interventions distort the long view locally. Correct, the liaison said. He introduces variance. Variance was dangerous. It created unpredictability. It also created opportunity. The long view tolerated variance only if it reduced total system weight. If variance increased burden, enforcement accelerated. Humanity was walking a narrow line. The liaison closed the overlays. We are no longer trying to win. The room was quiet. We are trying to persist, he continued. Long enough to matter. One persistence model was retired at that moment, not because it failed, but because it no longer reduced systemic weight. The long view did not promise that Earth would remain central. It promised that something human would continue, somewhere, under conditions that did not yet exist. That continuation was no longer assumed to include institutional inheritance, a constraint accepted without revision. Outside the continuity, people argued about politics, culture, and identity as if history were a straight line and the future an extension of the present. Inside, the long view treated those arguments as surface turbulence. What mattered was depth. The projection continued updating after the room emptied. No one stayed to watch the next iteration resolve. The resolution, when it arrived, would not permit retroactive interpretation. 156. Chapter 16. B. The night stretched longer than it should have. Not in hours. In feeling. Her great-grandmother did not check the fire. She let it burn the way it wanted to burn. Neither fed nor restrained. The girl noticed the choice and did not comment. They worked slowly. After a while, the girl asked, Why does time feel different sometimes? Her great-grandmother smiled faintly. Because time does not move the same way everywhere, she said. The girl frowned. But it's still the same night. Yes, the old woman replied, but not the same distance. The girl did not understand, but she nodded. In the stories, she said, important things happen fast. Yes, her great-grandmother said, because speed is easier to remember. The girl stitched carefully. Are slow things important too? They are the most important, the old woman replied. But people rarely notice them while they are happening. The fire settled into a deep glow. The girl asked, How long has this been going on? Her great-grandmother did not answer immediately. Longer than our names, she said. Shorter than the land. The girl considered that. Does it end? She asked. Yes, the old woman said. Everything does. The girl swallowed. Then why keep going? Her great-grandmother reached out and steadied the work, not correcting a mistake, just touching it. Because endings do not arrive all at once, she said. And what you do before them matters. The girl nodded slowly. In the dream, she said, time felt folded. Her great-grandmother inclined her head. That is how it looks when you step outside of urgency. The girl frowned. Can people do that? Sometimes, the old woman replied. Usually by accident. The girl stitched another row. Is that dangerous? It can be, her great-grandmother said. You see things you cannot unsee. The girl looked up. Like now? Yes, the old woman said. Like now? They worked in silence. Outside, the night felt wide and patient. The girl asked, When people plan far ahead, do they know what they're planning for? No, her great-grandmother said. They plan for shape, not detail. The girl frowned. What shape? Survival, the old woman replied. Continuation. Enough room for what comes next. The girl nodded. Is that what we're doing? Yes, her great-grandmother said. And have always done. The girl's hands slowed. Do people forget? She asked. Yes, the old woman said. Often. Then how does it keep going? Her great-grandmother smiled faintly. Because forgetting does not stop movement, she said. It only changes who notices it. The fire dimmed further. The girl asked, Are we late? Her great-grandmother met her eyes. No, she said. But we are close. The girl felt that settle somewhere deep. They finished the work without hurry. Outside, nothing dramatic happened. Time did not announce itself. But the girl understood that something long had bent slightly, and once bent, it would not return to the exact shape it had before. 160. Chapter 17. The Blue Star Kachina. The continuity would not exist without the knowledge-keeping tribes. That was not sentiment and not concession. It was an operational fact recorded repeatedly across cycles. When institutions collapsed, archives burned, and technical languages vanished. Certain human lineages preserved orientation rather than data. They carried ways of living that survived disruption without requiring dominance, scalability, or abstraction. They did not belong to the continuity as an institution, nor to any non-human alignment. They persisted alongside all of them. What the record made clear, and what was rarely stated openly, was that many modern indigenous peoples, including Native American, nations, and Aboriginal populations elsewhere, descended from appendix civilizations that had survived prior resets. They were not remnants of failure. They were continuations of deliberate preservation. Their persistence was not accidental. It was structural. Appendix civilizations did not inherit the world after collapse. They endured beneath it. When centralized systems failed, these populations carried forward land knowledge subsistence strategies, relational governance, and memory encoded in story, ritual, and practice rather than written archive. Over millennia, they appeared to outsiders as marginal or primitive. Within the continuity, they were recognized as resilient. Whether that resilience would again prove decisive was not yet known. But the record showed that when the world broke, these ways returned first. The Hopi material was reviewed with that understanding, not as prophecy, not as warning, as retained procedural memory encoded in culture because culture survived when systems did not. The Hopi record did not describe an arrival, it described a condition. The liaison made that distinction explicit at the outset because it was the point most often lost. Outsiders flattened the tradition into spectacle, mistaking description for prediction and ceremony for summoning. Inside the continuity, the Hopi teachings were treated differently. They were read as instructions for how humans behave when visibility returns. The cultural analyst brought the comparative material forward. The Kachinas are not a single class of beings, she said. They are intermediaries. They are relational. They appear when conditions allow and withdraw when those conditions fail. Kachina did not mean alien, angel, or god. It referred to manifested intelligences that operated between domains, sometimes embodied, sometimes not. In Hopi accounts, they taught, corrected, and maintained balance. They were present during certain cycles and absent during others. The ceremonies associated with them were not casual observances. They were deliberate acts of alignment. Hopi ceremonial practice emphasized balance with land, restraint, and extraction, and correct relationship between people, place, and season. When those relationships were maintained, the Kachinas were said to be present. When they broke, the Kachinas removed their masks and withdrew. The analyst continued. Some lineage accounts are explicit about descent, not metaphor, not allegory. Witness description, small beings observed during ceremonial conditions, reported as entering the ceremonial space from above, sometimes inverted, sometimes descending slowly, becoming perceptible only once ritual. Thresholds were met. These appearances are described as occurring within kivas and domestic ceremonial spaces, not as public spectacle. The record treats these accounts as lineage-specific, not universal doctrine, but they recur often enough to be logged as a visibility phenomenon rather than invention. The liaison nodded. He had seen similar descriptions preserved elsewhere, always bounded. Always. Careful, always transmitted as lived account rather than proclamation. The beings were described as small, often elaborately adorned, sometimes luminous, sometimes ordinary in texture. The forms varied by clan and period, but the structure of the accounts remained consistent. They were not framed as travelers arriving from a distant place. They were framed as presences permitted to cross when alignment was achieved. The Blue Star Kachina marked the final phase of that cycle, not because it brought the Kachinas, because it ended concealment. In Hopi tradition, the Blue Star was associated with the moment when the world became visible again. when separation between domains thinned to the point that intermediaries could no longer remain unseen. The star did not serve as an origin. It served as a marker. Visibility had returned. The liaison spoke quietly. So the Kachinas are not from the blue star. No, the analyst said. They are associated with it because that is when humans can see again. The ceremonies tied to the blue star were not intended to summon star brothers in the way outsiders imagined. They prepared the people to be observed. They were behavioral audits, not invitations. That interpretation aligned cleanly with the continuity's models. Non-human actors were already present, bound by non-intervention clauses, operating within constraints that prohibited overt engagement until visibility thresholds were crossed. The blue star did not bring them. It altered the conditions under which presence could be concealed. The Hopi accounts described two paths. One path accepted collapse as cleansing. Those who chose it prepared to let the world break and reform. They did not intend to fight the wave. They intended to ride it. The other path resisted, not through denial, but through preparation, through continuity of knowledge, careful use of land, and refusal to accelerate imbalance. The Hopi record did not privilege one path over the other. It acknowledged both. The analyst closed the file. The Kachinas do not intervene to save either group. No, the liaison said. They witness. That witnessing carried procedural weight, closing the evidentiary window, through which later disputes might otherwise have been argued. Witnessing was not passive. It was evaluative. That witnessing altered no outcomes directly, but it fixed the record in a way no later reinterpretation could revise. The Kachinas were not enforcers. They were intermediaries whose presence signaled that the system was being observed directly again, not inferred through proxies. Outside the continuity, public discussion reduced the Blue Star Kachina to apocalypse or fantasy. Inside, the material was treated with restraint. Indigenous knowledge was not treated as relic or mysticism, but as the surviving output of prior continuity strategies that had already proven their worth. The blue star remained visible. Children noticed. Elders remembered. Most people argued about whether any of it mattered. The Hopi record ended without climax. It ended with responsibility. The Kachinas did not save worlds. They did not destroy them. They appeared when humans could no longer pretend they were alone or unseen. The liaison issued the standard note that followed every review of indigenous custodial material. Appendix lineage confirmed. Knowledge retention independent of centralized systems. High relevance under visibility conditions. No claim of alignment. The Blue Star Kachina was not a visitor. It was a threshold. And humanity had crossed it. No further annotation followed. Chapter 17. B. They did not notice the change right away. The night looked the same as it always had. The stars were where they belonged. The air moved the way it should. Even the fire behaved, steady and contained. Her great-grandmother noticed anyway. She stopped working and looked toward the doorway, not sharply, not with alarm, but with attention that had been practiced for a long time. The girl followed her gaze. What is it? It has crossed the line where stories stop being enough, the old woman said. The girl frowned. I don't see anything. That is how it always begins, her great-grandmother replied. They sat quietly. After a moment, the girl asked, when something becomes visible, is it because it moved closer? Sometimes, the old woman said. More often, because you did. The girl thought about that. Did we move? Yes, her great-grandmother said. And so did everyone else. The girl's chest tightened, all at once. Not together, the old woman replied, but in the same direction. They returned to the work, but the rhythm had changed. The girl noticed she was more careful than usual, as if precision mattered more now. In the stories, she said, when it appears, people celebrate or panic. Yes, her great-grandmother said, because both are ways of avoiding standing still. The girl asked, is it dangerous now? Her great-grandmother considered this carefully. It is no more dangerous than it was yesterday, she said, but it is less forgiving. The girl swallowed. Does it see us? Yes, the old woman said. Clearly, the girl looked down at her hands. Do we matter to it? Her great-grandmother shook her head. Not as individuals, she said. As placement. The girl did not like that. Is that bad? It is accurate, the old woman replied. Outside, a faint change passed through the night. Not a sound, not a movement. Something closer to a pause that had not been there before. The girl felt it and stiffened. That felt like being looked at, she said. Yes, her great-grandmother said. That is exactly what it was. The girl whispered, what does it want? The old woman returned to her stitching. It does not want, she said. It registers The girl frowned. That's worse. Yes, her great-grandmother agreed. It usually is. They worked in silence for a long time. The girl finally asked, "Did this happen before?" "Yes," the old woman said. "And people survived?" "Yes." "And some didn't?" "Yes." The girl nodded. She did not ask why. "Why tell the story then?" she asked instead. Her great-grandmother smiled faintly. "Because the story is not for stopping it," she said. "It is for remembering where to stand." The girl considered this. "Is that what the men are doing?" she asked. "Dancing." "Yes," the old woman replied. "They are marking position, not celebration." The girl looked toward the door. "Should we go outside?" "No," her great-grandmother said. "Not yet." "Why?" "Because being seen too early fixes your place," the old woman replied, "and some places should not be fixed." The girl absorbed that quietly. Outside, the night remained calm. That was what frightened her. "It's very quiet," she said. Her great-grandmother nodded. "Yes," she said. "It has finished arriving." The girl felt the weight of that settle into her bones. They finished the work without speaking. Nothing dramatic happened. No light fell from the sky. No sound announced itself. But the girl understood that the stories were no longer about what might be seen. They were now about who was already standing in the open, and who had learned, just in time, how to remain still. Chapter 18. They're here. NASA did not intend to be first. The confirmation was supposed to arrive through a joint release. Staggered, just enough to distribute responsibility and dilute attribution. That had been the plan. It had survived 2 revisions and 1 rehearsal. It failed anyway. The failure was not technical. The data converged faster than the institutions could coordinate. At 9:17 UTC, a deep space tracking array registered a trajectory solution that could no longer be reconciled with natural motion without invoking assumptions that violated internal review thresholds. At 9:19, an independent optical system confirmed the solution visually. At 9:22, a civilian astronomy network posted a time-stamped image that aligned too closely to be coincidence. By 9:30, the phrase "instrument artifact" could no longer be defended. The briefing room was full when the director entered, already aware that the decision had been made without him. "This is no longer classified," the science lead said. "It's observable and explainable," the director said. "No," she replied, "only detectable." The language mattered. At 10:02 UTC, NASA issued the statement. It was brief, clinical, stripped of speculation. An object of non-natural origin has been confirmed within the inner observational range. Its behavior cannot currently be explained by known physical models. Further analysis is ongoing. No mention of intent. No mention of origin. No mention of contact. It did not matter. Within minutes, other agencies followed. Some confirmed. Some hedged. Some denied while quietly adjusting posture. Markets dipped, recovered, dipped again. Religious institutions issued statements that contradicted one another. Governments responded unevenly, exactly as predicted. The public did what it always did. They argued. Inside the continuity, the shift was immediate. The liaison watched the dashboards change color, not to red, to white. White meant exposure. It meant secrecy was no longer the primary constraint. It meant execution replaced concealment. One legacy compartment failed to transition cleanly, its latency absorbed by the continuity, without correction because RE synchronization would have exposed adjacent systems. "Phase transition confirmed," the logistics officer said. "Yes," the liaison replied. Appendix protocols move from verification to motion. No speeches, no votes. The continuity did not celebrate thresholds. It adapted to them. Assets repositioned quietly. Redundant systems went live. Human personnel were reassigned without explanation, told only that their orders were lawful and time-sensitive. Some complied without question. Some hesitated. A few refused. One refusal propagated effects beyond its origin point, introducing a delay the continuity absorbed without attempting attribution. The system accounted for all 3 outcomes. The astrophysics lead brought up the final composite image. The blue star was visible now to anyone who looked. Not dramatic, not blazing, just present. Distinct enough to register as wrong. Children pointed. Adults stared longer than they meant to. The strategic intelligence officer reported in. Non-human aligned systems are adjusting globally. Energy stabilization increasing. Communication redundancy improving. Enki, the liaison said. Yes. And Enlil, the military liaison asked. The astrophysics lead answered. No overt response. Metrics only. That was expected. The continuity did not announce itself. It never had. It moved. Appendix populations began relocation under the cover of routine disaster preparedness. Agricultural corridors shifted supply quietly. Data archives fragmented and duplicated. Nothing that could be pointed to. Everything that mattered. The fracture identified earlier did not resolve. Some compartments accelerated, others lagged. The continuity absorbed the discrepancy and continued anyway. Perfect alignment was no longer required. Motion was. Outside, commentators filled hours of airtime with questions they could not answer. Was it hostile? Was it friendly? Was it even real? Inside, no one asked those questions. They were irrelevant. The liaison issued the final instruction under pre-exposure protocols. Proceed. No further concealment, no interpretation. Maintain function. The blue star remained in the sky, not moving closer, not moving away. 172. Just there. NASA held a second briefing, then a third. Governments scrambled to assert control over narratives that no longer belonged to them. Religious leaders reinterpreted old texts. Scientists recalibrated instruments. Ordinary people went to work, or did not, unsure which choice mattered more. Inside the continuity, the assessment was simple. The world had crossed the visibility threshold. Crossing it eliminated the final distinction between observation and participation. A shift the continuity treated as irreversible. The liaison looked once more at the composite display, then turned to the room. They're here. Chapter 18. B. The fire was allowed to go out, not by accident, by choice. Her great-grandmother watched the last coal dim until it no longer held shape, only color, then nothing at all. The room did not rush to replace the light. Darkness settled without resistance. The girl waited. After a while she asked, "Is it finished?" Her great-grandmother did not answer immediately. "Yes," she said. "And no," the girl frowned. "Sounds like the beginning again." "It is," the old woman replied, "but not from the same place." They did not bring out work. There was nothing left that needed stitching. The girl shifted where she sat. Without the fire, the room felt larger, less defined. Edges were harder to find. "Why don't we light it again?" she asked. "Because some things need to be seen without help," her great-grandmother said. The girl was quiet. Outside, the night was no longer ordinary. Not loud, not threatening, just different enough that pretending otherwise took effort. The girl asked, "Is everyone seeing it now?" "Yes," the old woman said. "All at once?" "No," her great-grandmother replied. "But close enough?" The girl swallowed. What happens when everyone sees the same thing? Her great-grandmother considered this carefully. "They stop asking whether it is real," she said, "and start asking what they are supposed to do about it." The girl did not like that. "What if they don't agree?" "They won't," the old woman said. "Then what?" "Then movement happens anyway," her great-grandmother replied. "Just not together." The girl hugged her knees. "Is that bad?" "It is dangerous," the old woman said. "But danger is not the same as ending." The girl looked toward the door. "Can we still choose?" "Yes," her great-grandmother said. "But not what is happening." The girl nodded slowly. "Are the men coming back?" she asked. "Yes." When they are done being seen," the old woman replied. That answer settled something in the girl. After a long silence, she asked, "Did this happen before?" Her great-grandmother did not pretend not to understand. "Yes," she said. "Enough times that the story survived." The girl frowned. "But not everyone did." "No," the old woman said. The girl took a breath. "What do we do now?" Her great-grandmother reached out and placed her hand over the girl's, not squeezing, not guiding, just there. "We stand where we said we would," she said. "We keep what we were given. We do not rush to explain. We do not rush to follow. And we do not rush to disappear." The girl nodded. "That doesn't sound heroic." "It isn't," her great-grandmother said. "It is necessary." The girl sat with that. Outside, voices carried for the first time in hours. The men returning. Not singing, not dancing. Talking quietly, as if sound itself had become something to handle carefully. The girl asked, "Will things go back?" "No," her great-grandmother said. "Will they get worse?" "Yes," she said. "In some ways, and better in others," the old woman replied. The girl leaned against her. "What happens after this?" she asked. Her great-grandmother looked toward the doorway, then up, though nothing could be seen from inside. "After this," she said, "people will try to name what they are seeing. They will argue. They will build stories faster than they build shelter. They will mistake attention for safety." The girl felt tired. "And us?" she asked. "We will keep doing small things correctly," her great-grandmother said, "so that when the ground shifts, something still holds, The girl closed her eyes. Outside, the night did not end. It did not need to. Something had arrived that did not require permission, explanation, or belief.